the strongest support of the Fourth Hokage. Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction. So don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 228, Map Destroyer. A giant stood tall, an endless tangle of giant trees. A massive scroll unfolded behind Shinayu. Before him stood Susanoo, scepter and rosary in hand. The surrounding trees gradually quieted. Of course, this wasn't because Shinayu had given up resistance. The spreading curse and the increasingly clear immortal inscriptions all demonstrated his resolve to win. As for the trees, against an enemy of this caliber, sheer numbers alone wouldn't guarantee victory. While time was of the essence for Shinayu right now, and every second counted, building momentum was essential to counter Susanoo. This was Shinayu's first time using this technique. He clasped his hands together. Immortal technique, true thousand hands. The immortal's true form. Awesome power spread across all directions. The massive, wrathful Vajra form reappeared behind Shinayu. Its mountain-like form finally possessed the strength to challenge the giant before it. But it wasn't enough. A smug smile played across Jinayong's lips. Even without looking closely, it was clear that the angry King Kong standing behind him wasn't facing his enemy directly. Instead, he'd shifted his stance and stood to the side of Jinayong's body. Was that contempt? Was it composure? No, none of that was true. It was simply because Jinayong hadn't yet completed his move. As mentioned before, wood release, a form of life energy, is destined to have its own optimal form for everyone. For Hashirama, after activating Sage Mode, the Yang release and natural energy contained in True Thousand Hands naturally transformed into the Crown Buddha. For Shinayu, the Yang release energy in his body began to evolve towards the angry-eyed Vajra of 8 directions shocking martial arts. But for Shinayu, his body is more than just Yang release chakra. And now, for Shinayu, who can already control Yin release chakra to a certain extent, the form of wood release has changed again. The scroll spread out behind him suddenly rose up with a puff of smoke, and when the smoke dissipated, another Shinayu created by using wood release clones was sitting cross-legged there. The corners of his eyes were also covered with inscriptions symbolizing Sage Mode, but, compared to Shinayu's blazing red, the corners of his eyes were a charming and mysterious bright purple. Yin release chakra Sage Mode. Using the reverse summoning technique previously stored in the scroll, he summoned his wood release clone, which had retained much of the Yin release chakra, to the battlefield. Once the battle began, although the return of the Yin release energy would pose a significant risk to Shinayu, if used judiciously. Immortal technique, Akala Myo-O-Sun. Behind Shinayu, the incarnation's combat method, not facing the enemy, finally found its proper explanation. For on the other side of his body, another majestic and terrifying figure appeared out of nowhere. This figure sat on a flat stone throne, in the form of a child. 7 knots crowned its head, its braided hair cascading over its left shoulder. Its left eye was narrowly closed, its lower teeth biting its upper lip, a wrathful expression. A raging fire raged on its back, a sharp sword in its right hand, a noose in its left, as if severing afflictions. The world is in calamity, the Buddha is furious. The incarnation symbolizing the Buddha's wrath stood quietly behind Shinayong at this moment. The cloud pattern of the curse seal had begun to spread. And Shinayong's original appearance was almost unrecognizable. However, he was still smiling. Behind him, 2 majestic Dharma images remained silent. But the huge pressure subtly suppressed Susanoo in front of him. In front of the Dharma image symbolizing compassion and wrath, the giant entangled in destruction and devastation actually looked fragile. I'm going to do it, he clenched his hands suddenly, and the originally silent Dharma image also began to move. As fast as the wind. The agility was completely disproportionate to its size. In just a blink of an eye, the sword and the Vajra almost simultaneously smashed towards the Oriole standing on the opposite side of the mountain forest. Dodge. A strong sense of crisis instantly washed over her. It had to be said that you had greatly underestimated Jinayong's direct combat capabilities. While the enemy's situation, unlike previous intelligence, suggested this formidable force wouldn't last long. Resisting this current onslaught alone would likely be extremely difficult. Boom! With a last-minute dodge, the destructive attack simultaneously struck the towering peak. In an instant, the rocks crumbled, and the earth shook. The passing sword flattened the entire mountain. The golden pestle, striking the ground, instantly shook the area 10 miles in radius. Such terrifying attack power was completely beyond human reach. Even from a monster's perspective, Thousand Hands Jinayong's current state was unmatched. As one wave subsided, another arose. The giant on Susa similarly raised his scepter. A flash of destructive energy flashed from its tip. In the blink of an eye, the flash of terrifying power slammed directly into the majestic Dharma image. Boom! The sound of an explosion resounded. Under the immense might of a high-yield bomb explosion, a sharp counterattack arrived before the smoke and dust cleared. Boom! Boom! Boom boom boom! The sounds of explosions and destruction were endless. Less than 2 minutes had passed since the battle began, but the map of Konoha was destined to be rewritten. The pinnacle of power in this era was converging here. Judging from the situation in the monster duel, Shinayu clearly still had a considerable advantage, but he should have been calm, but he kept speeding up his attack rhythm. Faster! Faster! Mysterious curse marks had already covered his body, and above that, his appearance, which was originally just that of an ordinary human, began to silently transform. His skin turned into scales. His hands turned into claws. PS1, the combat power currently achieved by the protagonist in this chapter is basically equivalent to that of Hashirama Senju during the battle with Madara at the Valley of the End. PS2, Yinluo's bow power is indeed amazing, and her depth is unfathomable. Tisk tisk, she exploded back in minutes. Everyone, please support her. 3 more chapters are here. Chapter 229, The Risk of True Courage. 2 Dharma images, plus yin and yang energy, 2 types of sage modes supporting nearly limitless chakra. Even if his opponent was Uchiha Airi, who possessed a complete Susanoo, Shinayu had the complete upper hand. Or rather, if this trend continued, Uchiha Airi, incredibly powerful, toying with Konoha at his fingertips, would be like a candle in the wind, as if he would be swallowed by this incredibly powerful force tide at the slightest turn. This was overwhelming power. Or, if Shinayu had now fully reached the level of Hashirama Senju, his opponent, Uchiha Airi, would still be inferior to Uchiha Madara in his prime. The ground cracked, the sky wailed. The more he retreated, the more he was forced into a desperate situation. The more he dodged, the more he had no escape. The endless attacks, like a divine punishment, had no end in sight. As time passed, those attacks became more terrifying, more unrestrained, more frantic. Boom! The mere gust of wind sent shockwaves through the nearby village of Konoha, unimaginably strong. Ninjas and powerless civilians alike emerged from their houses, stunned to watch the conflict between the gods nearby. The Yondaime-sama hadn't issued any orders. While the battle was indeed taking place at Konoha's 4th training ground, the very fact that they could hold their ground, trembling with Kyune, demonstrated the utmost courage of a ninja. Many could only stare blankly at the scene before them, falling to the ground and begging for mercy from the gods. Everyone knew perfectly well that mortals could never possibly intervene in a struggle of this magnitude. Has it begun? After placing Kushina and Naruto in a safe place, Minato, in just a few minutes, had done his utmost to reinforce the seal on the Nine Tails. As he left his base, he saw the same thing the villagers had witnessed. Though the distance made it difficult to see clearly, a struggle of this magnitude would have completely destroyed the spatial coordinates there, surely? And that wasn't the only thing that was of concern. Leaving aside the purple giant, Minato had a deep memory of the 2 even more magnificent Dharma images. In the cave that day, Shinayu almost single-handedly turned the tide of the battle with the help of this thing. The power of the immortal technique was unquestionable. Honestly, even if Minato, who knew Shinayu best, were to deal with it, he wouldn't have a very good solution. However, he also understood the problem with this trick. Shinayu, the situation was still optimistic at the moment, but Minato still clenched the kunai in his hand. Just like the battle on Pingdingshan that day, after using this powerful trick, Shinayu's helpless look was still fresh in Minato's memory. In other words, he had to rush to the scene. Before he finished speaking, the air suddenly shook. The place where the Fourth Hokage had stood was already empty. A golden flash. Fight, the dividing line of risk in ninjutsu. But it wasn't simply because Jinayong was too eager for success. The black cloud pattern symbolizing the curse seal had completely vanished. By now, Jinyoung had reached the final stage of the seal's transformation. His body was almost completely on the verge of becoming half human, half beast. Just like what he'd seen that day in the lab, at this moment. Aside from the inscription on his face signifying sage mode, there was no trace of Senju Jinyoung left. He blindly increased his attack speed, obsessed with quickly defeating his enemies, because for Jinyoung, time meant risk. After nearly a year of hard work by Snake and Jinyoung, they had indeed found a way to temporarily coexist. The energies of Yang and Yin release the curse seal. But unlike the others, Jinyoung wasn't seeking to draw power from the seal. He simply needed the special energy channels it created within his body. Unfortunately, these energy channels gradually weakened as the seal's release deepened, until eventually, they disappeared completely. At that moment, Jinyoung's body will once again transform into a battlefield of conflicting energies. Without anyone else's intervention, the collision and explosion of energies will instantly reduce him to ash. So he has to be quick. Only by doing this faster can he close the energy conversion channel before the curse completely loses its effect. Faster, faster. Ming Wang's sharp sword finally hits Yu's armor squarely. In just a blink of an eye, the seemingly indestructible Susanoo finally collapses. A chance for a decisive kill. P.S. I believe that your recommendations, rewards, and other things tomorrow morning will reach the goal, so I'm posting this update first. Meow. Chapter 230, The Last Card. Faster. Faster. Yu's sharp sword finally struck Yu's armor squarely. In the blink of an eye, the seemingly indestructible Susanoo finally crumbled. A chance for a decisive kill. Shinao admitted he had reached his limit. Judging by the state of his body, after the strike, he would have to convert the energy of either Yang or Yin done. Otherwise, his body would undoubtedly become the center of the explosion. The scene would be quite spectacular. Without hesitation, the weapon in Vajradharmaka's hand fiercely smashed into Yu's fragile body. A single strike would kill. Boom, the terrible dust and smoke spread again, and this time, the last time, the world finally calmed down completely. The purple giant had long since disappeared into thin air, and the two Dharma bodies that seemed like gods also gradually decayed. Between heaven and earth, the decisive battle that seemed to destroy the world finally ended. People could only be thankful that this battle did not take place in Konoha, but the fourth training ground that originally belonged to Konoha, and the large area extending from it, would probably require relevant technical personnel to resurvey and map it for a long time in the future, in order to draw a new map. Here, there is no longer any grass or trees, and now all that meets people's eyes is a desolation. Jinyoung gasped for breath, unable to even maintain a standing posture. The sage mode has been lifted, and the appearance that has changed due to the curse without using alien chakra has also begun to gradually recover. The human form reappeared. However, unlike other people's seals, Yo with Makrontanen and Yo with Makrontanen, these two energies far exceeding the power of ordinary chakra, once activated, their power is completely erased. This is why using seals to control alien chakra energy is only a temporary solution. After all, re-engraving the seal requires not only Orochimaru's exceptional skill, but even if he were to do it himself, it would be time-consuming. Such an ability can only be used for a one-time use, not in actual combat. As for the gradual loss of human form after using the seal, it's merely a side effect. Orochimaru believes that if one were to simultaneously maintain two energies of equal quality but opposite natures within their body, then, aside from the legendary sages, only a monster could achieve it. That's right, the legendary monster known as the Ten Tails. If one aspires to become the Sage of Six Paths, acquiring the Sharingan is a good option. However, for Shinao, a quicker and more effective method is different. The cursed seal implanted in his body not only possesses the ability to divide energy, but also contains the genes of certain special animals. As the special energy channels gradually disappear, to withstand the explosive force and minimize any unexpected damage, these genes will modify the host's body to increase its resistance to energy. It now seems that this unpleasant process has served its purpose, at least it bought Shinao a few precious seconds. Win, or not? A sharp kunai pierced Shinao's chest from behind, and large streams of blood gushed from the wound. What? For the first time since the battle began, things have gone beyond Shinao's expectations. He suddenly exerted force behind himself, and with the help of the recoil caused by the strong impact, Xianyang temporarily escaped from the opponent's attack range. And in his heart, a hideous hole was silently telling of horror. The woody muscle tissue began to grow in coils, gradually healing the wound, but Xianyang's brows were tightly locked, and his face looked sickly pale due to the heavy blood loss. Just as I thought, a similarly disheveled figure gradually emerged from the spot where the attack had just begun, like fragments of debris gathering from all corners of the universe. Without a doubt, this was Yu's Mirror Flower and Water Moon. Did she use the substitution technique to escape at the last moment? Senju Shinayu, you didn't erase the mark. You simply used the circulation of different chakras to temporarily become immune to my illusion. Her voice was filled with pride and disdain, despite the fact that she had been forced by Shinayu for a long time and was unable to fight back. Tisk, it seems the secret is that thing behind your neck. A voice suddenly sounded from behind Shinayu. Yu almost completely pressed against his back. But he didn't dodge. In the Mirror Flower and Water Moon, he had no way of judging the other party's true position. If I had held out any longer, I think I would have been dead. She shook her head regretfully, then smiled a seductive smile. But unfortunately, I'm the winner in the end. As soon as he finished speaking, blood erupted from Shinayu's shoulder again. Detonating talisman. He instinctively dodged backwards. The yang release energy was already repairing his body while inflicting damage. However, this self-regenerative ability wasn't limitless. If this continued, Shinayu would definitely die. Unfortunately, he had already played all his cards. In that final blow, he had exhausted all his trump cards. Unfortunately, that's the end. Though he didn't know where the attack would come from, Shinayu stared calmly at the illusion before him. All he could do now was endure, and wait. Hey, do you know why they call me the twins of Konoha? Oh, you scoffed. Is that a death threat? No, this time, Shinayu smiled. I'm just warning you. Be careful of the golden flash. Puff, the sound of a blade piercing the body echoed, and several points of crimson shot through the night sky. P.S. Today's recommendation is almost reaching 1,000, even with last night's. This is the second one. Everyone, awesome. Chapter 231, Huakunjin. Puff, the sound of a blade piercing the flesh echoed. In the night sky, a few spots of crimson shot up. Drip, drip, the sound of dripping blood continued. The white divine robe fluttered in the wind, and before Shinayu, the golden-haired figure was all too familiar. Are you alright? The person asked, not turning around, and though his tone was calm, Shinayu could clearly hear the concern in it. Don't worry, you're not dead yet. Although the wound was indeed horrific, for a user of wood release, this level of damage was far from fatal. Like the first generation back then, Shinayu now possessed a terrifying ability that could almost be called self-regeneration. Compared to this, don't let her get away, Minato, don't worry. Before he could finish his words, the golden flash had already vanished. Perhaps from the perspective of the scene, the attack of the Fourth Hokage is far less majestic than that of Shinayang's massive wood release, nor as gorgeous as that of Iari's Jinho Shuayu. But only the enemies who fight with him can feel how powerful the horror that decides life and death in an instant is. Dividing line for perspective transformation. At least in the previous duel, apart from seeing through her illusions once, the Fourth Hokage, known as the youngest Hokage, really didn't have many shining points. And for this opponent who was destined to have no chance of fighting against her complete form of Susanoo, you didn't take it seriously at all. Oh, you sneered. Is this a threat before death? Even if he was really there now, what would it matter? You was not stupid. She had already made a rough guess about the previous situation. It was nothing more than the other party had left a lot of special coordinates inside the delivery room. With the help of these coordinates, he sensed the approaching Jew. And now, with this place completely destroyed, those coordinates that were arranged before might have been destroyed long ago. There is nothing to be afraid of. No, Xianyang, who couldn't find her direction at all, smiled. I'm just reminding you, it's best to be careful of the golden flash. Careful? Wood Release's recovery ability is indeed astonishing, but after just a few tests, the speed of recovery is indeed gradually slowing. So, if I cut off your head this time, the legend of the Konoha twins will end here, right? With a sneer, Yu swiftly swung the kunai. In a moment, a good head would fall silently. But, at this moment, a strand of golden hair suddenly appeared before her. That short hair, with a hint of sunshine, now only filled Yu with endless murderous intent. Stab. The specially crafted kunai easily pierced her abdomen. Judging from the location of the injury, probably a kidney? Retreat. Several spots of crimson shot across the night sky. The tide turned. This time, when she raised her head, she saw the man in the white divine robe, a golden flash, Namikaze Minato. How could it be? That's the flying thunder god technique. The intense pain nearly paralyzed you. There shouldn't be any special coordinates here that could be provided to Minato. If that were the case, how had he used flying thunder god to directly complete the attack? No. Wait. It was at that time. Shinju's final attack. You had indeed dodged the attack of the Vajradharma image by the tiniest hairline, but at the moment of shattering Susa's defense, his body had come into contact with that terrifying magical weapon for a split second. Was it at that time? He had a backup plan even before the outcome was certain. Senju Shinju, this man had left a special mark somewhere on his body that Minato could use to jump. He had miscalculated. Don't worry, before he could finish his words, the golden flash had already vanished. And almost at the same time, the Fourth Hokage, holding a Rasengan, appeared out of thin air in front of you. He couldn't avoid it. At the end of her strength, Iori could only forcefully open Susa, whose only ribs were visible. And it was precisely with this last shred of defense that she was able to escape the Fourth Hokage's final blow. But that was all. Iori's chakra and stamina had already reached their limits, and under such circumstances, she couldn't possibly withstand Minato's attack. His elusive nature was no mere talk. He had barely been sent flying. Even as Iori's body hovered in the air, Minato, having struck a successful blow, leaped back, this time with his kunai nearly piercing his opponent's chest. Flying Thunder God Stage 2. Her chakra had reached its limit, and the opponent, using the Flying Thunder God technique, was strangling her almost continuously. Add to that the wounds from the recent battles. Iori closed her left eye, symbolizing the mirror flower and water moon, but that didn't mean she had given up resistance. In her right eye, a bewildering windmill began to spin. Ninjutsu, Yamazu. Whoosh, Minato's attack passed through the opponent without causing the slightest damage. It was as if the opponent was merely an illusion? A genjutsu? No. Impossible. From the onlooker's perspective, Shinju saw no signs of chakra change within Minato's body. He didn't believe the opponent had time to modify his perception in such a life-or-death situation. Then there was only one possibility. Izanami, Shinju's voice was low. As far as he could tell, there was only one jutsu that could do what had just happened, the secret Uchiha ninjutsu that transformed any unfavorable situation into an illusion. Huh. It seems you know quite a bit. The severely wounded Yui surprisingly stood up steadily. Her wounds weren't bleeding anymore, though her face still had a subtle paleness. But unfortunately, you're wrong. This is an ability that belongs only to me. Besides, goodbye. Next time. I'll plan everything, Yui began, then gradually became transparent before Mayu and Minato, before vanishing completely. It was almost as if she herself had become part of the illusion. P.S. The final chapter of this volume. Everyone. I need more support. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 232, New Generation. Pursue? That's right. This situation is probably the best chance to kill Uchiha Iori. Ultimately, both Minato and Shinju are still under the influence of Kyokusu Jutsu. Against this absolute illusion, ordinary defenses are ineffective. If they let him go, Konoha will face a ticking time bomb at any moment. Should they continue the pursuit? True, with Minato's speed and the special seals still on his body, he could easily catch up. But then what? After all, dealing with a genjutsu-type ninja alone is a serious taboo, let alone Iori, who possesses the superb illusion abilities of Kyokusu Jutsu. Furthermore, the way he ultimately evaded Minato's attack is intriguing. Excluding the influence of the illusion, Shinju is almost certain he didn't use a stand or other jutsu to liberate himself. So how did he do that? Why did Minato's fatal strike pass right through him without causing any damage? This scene inevitably brings to mind Obito in the original story. Spatial abilities? If that's the case, why didn't the other party use it in the previous fight? The only thing we know for sure about this ability is that it must originate from the other eye of the main Gekio, but the exact mechanism or workings are completely unknown. Pursuing rashly in these circumstances would likely yield no benefit. Worse still, even crawling back to the village would be a hassle, let alone pursuing. So, it hurts. It hurts. It hurts, Shinayu cried out exaggeratedly, standing up with Minato's help and slowly moving forward. Hey, Minato, can't we just use Flying Thunder God to jump back? There wasn't much exchange, but both sides were clear that the option of pursuing had been ruled out. No, we're out of chakra. The Yondan closed his eyes, chin held high, and dragged Shinayu forward. You're a bitch. From beginning to end, you only used Flying Thunder God and the Rasengan a few times. How could you possibly have used up all your chakra at that rate? There's a limit to underestimating my intelligence, eh? You're lying, I told you, he interrupted Shinayu without hesitation. He even exerted a powerful force on the hand that had been holding him back from the shoulder. Chakra's all gone. Wait? Is this the legendary Tsundeer? Ahem. Minato, I'm sorry I didn't tell you before this operation, nothing. Even if you were kept in the dark, Senju Shinayu-sama still handled everything perfectly, didn't you? As a hero, don't you want to return to the village with dignity and let everyone cheer? Just kidding. I miss you too, but the pain is unbearable right now. Even though he thought so, Shinayu's years of suppressing his emotional intelligence made him rationally choose the most reliable response. Hey, Minato, he said with a smile that looked even uglier than tears. It's my fault this time. Next time, I'll definitely consult you first. A sneer curled up the corners of Little Sun's mouth. You read that right. That smile wasn't warm at all. Tisk, no, it's not bad for me to stand aside and watch Lord Senju's personal heroism, right? Come on, let's walk back to the village. The villagers are waiting for you to go back. Minato, pitifully let's go. Minato, with tears in his eyes, let's go. Minato. Remember this, the dividing line between a new generation. After the Third Shinobi World War, the turmoil caused by Uchiha Airi finally came to an end. Soon after, Konoha announced the entire conspiracy, glossing over certain details. The other nations learned of the powerful and cunning individuals lurking in the shadows. The great powers were shaken. According to reports, even the Fire Nation, which supported Konoha, was affected by the unrest. The ninja world became bustling once again, and with this opportunity, the relationship between the ninja villages and the major nations underwent a new shift. Of course, Minato and Shinayu had to put these matters aside. The heroes who had just saved Konoha had a more important mission ahead of them. Wah! The sound of babies crying, seemingly unsettling, became the dominant theme of the Senju residence. Mizuho, deeply pleased with her daughters-in-law, now adored her grandchildren even more. Minato and Kushina welcomed their first son, named Naruto Namikaze. Meanwhile, Shinayu and Washi had their own little princess, named Senju Chinatsu. While they both had their own homes, they couldn't help but rely on their mother's help when it came to childcare. With Mizuho, their mother-in-law, volunteering, they moved back into the Senju family's old house. While Minato knew immediately that Naruto wasn't the type to use his power for personal gain, Shinayu, the head of the Anbu, couldn't afford to be so lenient. Following the baby supplies raid incident a year prior, Shinayu immediately ordered all members of the route to gather anything Naruto and Chinatsu might need. The Senju clan's warehouse quickly became overwhelmed with toys and valuable junk items. Ninjutsu scrolls? Shinayu had already relegated that kind of thing to the dark, damp basement. And so, Konoha's new generation began to grow up under their meticulous care. P.S. Although none of the goals have been achieved, even if friendship is better, no matter what the story I wrote is like, and no matter whether it is because of your prejudice or my fault, the fan fiction that updates 3 times a day is here. Those who support it can vote and reward, and those who don't like it, just take a detour. Chapter 233, The Little Prince. Morning arrived once again. The morning light, like a white ripple washing over everything, descended upon the land once more. And Konoha's morning, like every other day, awoke to the sound of birdsong. Hard-working residents rose early, and by now, more than half of the shops lining the streets had already opened their doors. The even more diligent ninjas, in the morning light, welcomed their fellow comrades for their shifts. Konoha, as always, was a scene of peace and tranquility. Bang, peaceful. Calm. Bang, Peaceful. Naruto, directly transmitted by Mizuho, Uzumaki Kushina Ryu, True Lion's Roar Technique. Well, for the Senju clan and the surrounding residents, this had become a regular morning ritual. While the sunny, powerful, and remarkably affable Fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, certainly gave off a mature, stable, and highly respected impression, his son, how should I put it? At only 4 years old, Naruto always looked incredibly energetic. After all, as the village Kage and son of Konoha's hero, despite being a bit naughty, little Naruto was generally quite polite. In such situations, the neighbors and villagers were always happy to treat Naruto to delicious food and fun things, a gesture of respect for their fathers and heroes. Naruto, stop right there, Kushina chased him out of the kitchen, spatula in hand. A picky eater won't grow tall. On the other hand, little Naruto, who was only 4 years old, had obviously inherited his father's agility. When other children could only run around staggeringly under the care of their family members, he was already able to run freely over various obstacles like an ordinary genan, such as tables, chairs, benches, door and window guardrails. Thanks to this, the room that Kushina had spent a lot of effort to clean yesterday was ruined again. I don't want to. Old woman, Naruto, who had already climbed up the window, made a face at Kushina, and then ran away in a flash. What? Obviously, for women, especially women who have given birth, the 3 words old woman are absolutely taboo words. I say, Kushina, who had nowhere to vent, could only grab Minato, who had been reading the newspaper with a bitter face beside her. 4th generation Hokage. Are you just going to watch your wife being bullied? Well, Minato protected his ears and smiled helplessly. Hey, who did he offend? Under the couple's careful care, 4 years have passed in a blink of an eye. Compared to the cute and well-behaved Naruto who was held in their arms back then, the little guy now has some shadow of a naughty monkey. He will probably be a problem child after entering the ninja school. Oh, plus this kind of routine every morning, my ears must be often in trouble. Go and get Naruto back to me immediately. Quick, kicking Minato's buttocks hard, the great 4th Hokage had no choice but to jump along with the momentum and also jumped out of the window. Really, it is really distressing to have to take an unusual route to go to work every day. Finally free of the old woman's pestering, Naruto felt so light he could fly. I wouldn't eat water spinach or anything like that, even if you kill me, he curled his lips in disdain. For Naruto, he had nothing to fear from his father, Minato, with whom he had a close personal relationship since childhood. Rather, when he was younger, facing his mother's scolding, Naruto would always swiftly hide behind Minato, and then it was Minato who was the unlucky one to receive his mother's beatings. Until recently, Naruto, with the blood of the Uzumaki clan, finally possessed a sufficient amount of chakra. Furthermore, as the son of the 4th Hokage, Naruto had long been aware of training his chakra control abilities under his father's guidance. While he couldn't quite do it at will, he could manage some simple applications. Overall, his athletic ability was far superior to other children his age. And the reason he rushed out in such a hurry today wasn't entirely without a purpose. Little Naruto clenched his fists tightly. If the fearless Naruto is afraid of anyone in the entire Konoha village, apart from his mother, it is probably only that family. Although it is unscientific, from parents to children, no one can make Naruto feel at ease. Well, although the relationship between the two families has always been very close, even if it is not a festival, they will always get together every once in a while, but the little prince of Konoha is really helpless against that family. And among them, that guy is the most hateful. However, this time is different. The ninjutsu that I just learned yesterday, this time I must defeat that female devil. P.S. First shot, please give me everything. Chapter 234, Little Princess. Lifting a pot. With delicate hands, 2 beauties, one large and one small, sat facing each other in a spacious room, their eyes lowered, silent, yet within that silence was a hint of a silent smile. For a woman, this kind of silent stillness, a form of beauty, is the most captivating and enchanting. Well, while there were women with this kind of noble bearing among the women Shinayu had known, in the end, he still chose the brave and resolute Wuyu's, a battlefield macho. But now, it seems, after turning 20, Wuyu's has taken on a certain air of nobility, driven by her husband and children. Tea ceremony and flower arranging, for Uchiha Wuyu's, her childhood clearly lacked the leisure for these trivialities. But that doesn't mean she lacks a girly side. Rather, as a mother, Shinayu discovered she longed to fulfill her own shortcomings in her daughter's hands. Sitting in the courtyard, drinking silently, a faint smile curved the corners of Shinayu's mouth. Especially since his own Chinatsu, though still just a little girl, was nothing like the other children's snotty little puffballs. No matter who he met, Shinayu could pat his chest and tell them that his daughter was a beautiful little princess. Even if she wasn't her father's lover in a past life, even in the eyes of the rest of the world, Chinatsu of the Senju family was truly a Konoha princess. The role model for all the little girls in the village. With her big, watery eyes, sweet smile, and skin as smooth and supple as a boiled egg, coupled with a graceful demeanor that belied her age and an approachable attitude, perhaps, even compared to the playful and lively little prince of the Minato family, the Senju princess was even more endearing. Of course, more than that, like Naruto, Chinatsu inherited the Senju and Uchiha clans, and even a small amount of Uzumaki blood. Genetically, she was practically destined to become the next sage of six paths. Okay, let's stop here for today. While deeply passionate about raising her daughter to be a true noble, Tsusha wasn't one to push things too far. Since her parents had already endured so much hardship, she wanted her daughter to have a happy childhood. So, whether it was tea art or flower arranging, Tsusha only offered a few lessons each morning, on a voluntary basis. Most of the time, Tsusha was more than happy to play various fun games with Mayu by her side. Tsusha simply smiled faintly at this. Perhaps it was because since childhood, Mayong had never had any father heirs, or he really doted on his daughter too much, so when Chinatsu spoke for the first time and uttered the word Mayong, he just smiled and lifted his daughter up high, but did not correct her. Over time, 4-year-old Chinatsu rarely said the word dad, and more often she would call him by his name out of courtesy. Hi, princess. She squatted down with a smile, and then opened her arms. Chinatsu, who was wearing a kimono and looked like a lady just now, suddenly took off the mask of maturity and turned into a lively and cute child again, running towards Mayong in a hurry with a big smile on her face. A warm hand lifted Chinatsu, holding her waist and allowing the princess to sit astride his shoulders. For those who had met Shinayu on the battlefield, it would have been hard to imagine that this powerful, formidable man, with his constant mocking smile, could actually play carefree with his daughter in his own courtyard like a normal father. Chinatsu held Shinayu's head with one hand, waving the other excitedly in the air. So tall, the enormous tree, planted long ago in the courtyard, caught the little princess's attention. Curious, she raised her hand, as any child would, as if wanting to pluck a flower from its branches. Of course, for any child, this would have remained a lifelong fantasy, but for Chinatsu, the enormous tree was like a kind old man. As Chinatsu extended her hand, its long branches actually bent, then drooped down. The vibrant flower was the old man's gift. Little Chinatsu, do you remember what Daddy taught you yesterday? Shinayu patted her calf with a smile, and the little princess pouted proudly. Of course. Shinayu, just watch. Little Chinatsu, still enjoying the beautiful fragrance, held the flower in her hands and closed her beautiful eyes. As if muttering a child's unique spell, something magical actually happened. The flower, so beautiful just moments ago, suddenly withered. Shinayu, observing this, showed no sign of surprise, but simply nodded. Chinatsu was even more motivated. She closed her eyes again, and this time, her mumbling spell lasted longer. With her continued effort, the once withered flower began to regain its original vitality at a visible speed. Look! Shinayu, clearly, the little princess hadn't been sure about this step at first, but the rare success immediately made her dance with joy. She couldn't wait to hand the flower to Minato, almost as if showing it off. But, at this moment, an accident happened. Apparently, Chinatsu's efforts were a bit too much. In the blink of an eye, the flower suddenly grew wildly. Before Chinatsu could react, the vines on the flower seemed to be stimulated and instantly twisted and wrapped around Chinatsu's arm, and the growth was about to intensify. In panic, the little princess could only try hard to throw the flower away, but after realizing that this was completely futile, her beautiful eyes suddenly became misty. Shinayu first gave a few inelegant giggles, then slowly tapped the flower in Chinatsu's hand. The mad vines immediately stopped moving, slowly withering and disappearing, while the flower remained intact. Keep up the good work, little Chinatsu HMPH cap. Master, amidst the playful encounter between father and daughter, A delicate voice suddenly rang out, clearly familiar to both Shinayu and little Chinatsu. "What's wrong, Uian? Minato-sama's son is almost here." Oh, Shinayu wasn't surprised by Naruto at all. After all, due to their family connections, Chinatsu and Naruto had practically grown up together. He nodded, without any further comment. Meanwhile, little Chinatsu, perched on Shinayu's shoulder, flashed a sly smile she had never worn before. P.S. Second update, here it comes. Ask for everything. Chapter 235, Your Majesty the Queen. And little Chinatsu sitting on Shinayu's shoulders, revealed a sly smile she had never shown before. Aha, is it finally here? In Konoha village, parents usually like to teach their children this lesson. Look at little Chinatsu from the Senju family. She's so well behaved. That's right, for all the villagers, Senju Chinatsu is almost synonymous with a good child, and naturally, from an emotional point of view, little Chinatsu is the class enemy of all the other children. However, at the same time, regarding Senju Chinatsu, the children dare to be angry but dare not speak out. Don't get me wrong, in this regard, even Shinayu, who dotes on his daughter enough, would not do anything to cause trouble for the children. All of this comes from Senju Chinatsu herself. The Lolita, who is loved by the adults and called Little Princess, actually has an even more domineering nickname among the children, Queen. That's right, in a place most people don't know, or perhaps it's the truth, Chinatsu is, after all, the daughter of the Wasp. This little queen of Konoha once achieved the remarkable feat of 1 against 100 in a small grove where children played together. Even the young geniuses of her age were completely powerless against Chinatsu, an overwhelming advantage. If you ask why, Chinatsu Senju, from the moment she was born, was destined to become a legend. At the age of 2, she was proven to possess the ability to use wood release in a game with her father, Senju Mahiro. From that day on, the number of Senju clan members who had awakened wood release increased from 2 to 3. After the wood release bloodline was confirmed, another idea, originally anticipated but unbelievable, began to surface. Legend has it that the Senju clan of Konoha mastered wood release, or yang release, while the Uchiha clan, in contrast, wielded the Sharingan, or yin release, pupil technique. And the six-path sage, whose existence remains unknown, is the only being to possess both powers. Could it be Sage Mode, capable of wielding the Mangekyou? Or something even more formidable? No one could speculate, for they had barely witnessed a peak of either power. About 10 years ago, the appearance of Shinayu finally gave people a basic understanding of the legendary power, wood release, the power capable of single-handedly opposing the entire ninja coalition. As this intuitive concept began to crystallize, curious minds began to wonder, just how powerful could a true sage truly be? Chinatsu's birth made all of this possible, the child of a Senju and an Uchiha. The offspring of the most accomplished wood release user and the most accomplished, on paper, Sharingan user. Could this little girl create an astonishing miracle? The people's prayers were finally fulfilled. Just moments ago, as she was about to blow out the candles on her birthday cake, little Chinatsu, just as her parents had taught her, clasped her hands, closed her beautiful eyes, and silently made a wish. Chinatsu's true wish remains unknown, but the moment she opened her eyes, Konoha's dream had come true. Without warning, a crimson Magatama flickered gently in her eyes, appearing so fragile and childish. But almost everyone knew that one day, this little girl would possess power surpassing all her predecessors. Though peace had arrived, and the shadow of war wouldn't loom for a while, the villagers of Konoha rejoiced for a long time. It seemed a new six-path was about to be born. She would be born in Konoha, perhaps just a few blocks from your home. Because of this extraordinary development, almost like encountering the god of creation in some mysterious dimension and being granted 7 wishes. Among Konoha's younger generation, even including the newly graduated Ninja Academy kids, there was practically no one who could stand up to Chinatsu. While the adults cheered, Konoha's younger kids lamented. Several, including those from the Nara and Akimachi families, sternly pledged to stay home and study the secret arts and signed a pledge, asking their parents to supervise them and never let them go out alone. The older generation nodded in agreement, delighted that their idiots had turned over a new leaf. They each requested leave from their departments and returned to cultivate their family's hopes. The poor kids, suffering agonizing torture, had to hold back their tears and grit their teeth. It wasn't that they didn't want to go out, but rather that someone beat them up without leaving a trace outside. They preferred to be properly trained at home by their parents. That damn devil, who knew where he learned it from? HU, as soon as Chinatsu was put down, Shin-Aong's nose immediately itched. Could it be that Minato guy was saying bad things about me behind my back? Shin-Aong frowned and scratched the tip of his nose, then patted Chinatsu's head kindly, bent down and said with a smile on his face, "Get along well with your brother." "Yeah, that's right, the relationship between the two families is very good, and it's very normal for a father to give such advice." "I know, Shin-Aong," the little lolly answered in a voice that was so sweet that it was sickening. Then, Shin-Aong childishly raised his thumbs up, and passed it across his neck. "As long as he doesn't kill or maim him, it's fine." Chinatsu was stunned for a moment, then immediately stood at attention and saluted Shin-Aong. "Okay. Hey. Is it really okay for you to do this? Is it really okay? P.S. I'm finally home. Getting ready for vacation. Yeah, today's portion will start after dinner. This is the first update, so I'll send it here first." Chapter 236, The Battle for the Leader of the Children. In Konoha today, the division of power among the children is quite clear. Applying the teachings Shinai received years ago, the current situation among them can be described as one superpower, many pulls. The one superpower naturally refers to little Chinatsu. After the awakening of the Sharingan, Chinatsu, already possessing wood release, became the world's sole king of the children. This situation, on the one hand, intensified Princess Chinatsu's desire to dominate the children's world, prompting her to intensify her hegemonic and unilateral foreign policy. On the other hand, the old balance established by the remaining geniuses was shattered, making it difficult to establish a new one. The multiple poles primarily refer to Sasuke, Shikamaru, Neji, and Naruto, among the other powerful ones. Since the failure of the armed rebellion, Naruto's speed and dedication to self-cultivation, self-torture, and self-improvement have been particularly noteworthy. With Minato's help, he adheres to the strategy of 10 days is not too late for a gentleman's revenge. He has also rallied with the other powerful ones to promote a common foreign policy and defense plan, and a unified anti-Senju Chinatsu alliance treaty. So far, he has successfully escaped the clutches of the enemy several times. Today is definitely a very significant day for Naruto. You know, although Naruto had organized many actions to resist tyranny before, ranging from marches and demonstrations to armed riots, the only result he got was to escape except being beaten up. But from today on, history will be rewritten. Naruto proudly adjusted the goggles on his head, and then showed his signature smile. Well, from this angle, it seems that there is a bit of Minato's shadow? No. He is still too naughty. Standing outside the gate of the Senju mansion, Naruto, who is obviously just a little kid, let out bursts of low laughter in his childish voice. Until yesterday, he had learned a terrifying ninjutsu that could definitely be called earth-shattering and tearful. "Yoshi, I must avenge my previous defeat today." Naruto patted his cheeks at last. On the one hand, it was to cheer himself up. After all, the opponent's prestige was too terrifying, and on the other hand, Naruto also wanted to concentrate himself in this way. This opponent would require him to use all his strength to defeat. By the way, if he wins, should he beat her up to vent his anger? Forget it. Naruto subconsciously shrank his neck. Compared to that female devil, Uncle Zenyaong is even more difficult to deal with, not to mention Aunt Uchiha Jiu who always has a cold face. Well, it's decided, a man should be magnanimous. As long as she is willing to apologize, then don't make things difficult for her. So Naruto, full of confidence, finally decided to knock on the door of the Senju family. He gathered all his true energy, gathered all his strength in his palm, and advanced towards the goal with difficulty. Squeak! Almost at the same moment he made up his mind, the Senju clan's front door suddenly and slowly opened. Naruto, caught off guard, nearly fell flat on his butt. When he finally regained his balance, the brother who was like an older sister to him was already there, just like always. He had almost forgotten about this person. Almost every time Naruto came here, this scene would happen. The name Lianga Euin had long replaced the original meaning of the word elusive in Naruto's mind. "Welcome, Master Naruto." Neither humble nor arrogant, yet not polite, the clear and unworldly voice became even more pleasant to the ears. One had to admit, even under the glory of the Senju clan, Euin had gradually grown into a perfect and enviable man. "Ah. Good morning, brother Euin," Naruto greeted politely, a rare occurrence. Although he was definitely at a relative's house, he was much more obedient here than at home. Is Chinatsu home? Naruto suddenly realized a problem. He had rushed here so excitedly, but if she wasn't home, wouldn't that be a tragedy? What if Auntie Wasi saw him and checked his recent homework? Even though he hadn't entered the ninja school yet, he was the son of the Fourth Hokage after all. Wouldn't that be a tragedy? Cold sweat streamed down his forehead. He hadn't even managed to climb a tree in the first chakra control exercise he was required to do after class. If he was discovered, he would be dead. The young lady is in the courtyard. If you need anything, you can go find her there, huh? So she was at home. Naruto's heart finally settled down. It seemed that his trip was not in vain. Huh? With a sneer, Naruto hurried towards the courtyard. The Senju mansion wasn't large, and having frequented it since childhood, Naruto knew the route like the back of his hand. When he finally arrived at the arena, his opponent had already been quietly waiting on a stone bench. He, Chinatsu, who always appeared honest and sweet in front of everyone, curled her lips into a cruel smile. Well, in that respect, she's inherited more of the true courage. A ninja from the older generation would have been horrified to see that smile. Konoha's Ink Shadow had countless times used that smile to play cat and mouse with his enemies to death. Naruto shuddered, even without a reason, before he could even hand over the challenge he'd prepared. I didn't go looking for you, little mouse, but you came to me, a soft, milky voice echoed. Though her voice was still cute, the scheming Lolita's voice now completely overturned most people's impression of her as a gentle and charming woman. P.S. Second update. Ask for everything. Chapter 237, oh no. Brave. Naruto. You're different now. You've become even stronger. Stop talking nonsense. I'm going to defeat you today. Though he still felt a little unsure, with his newly mastered ninjutsu, Naruto felt he had no problem. Oh, the impulsive Chinatsu raised an eyebrow. While Uncle Minato had always given people the image of strength and stability, in comparison, this little fellow, despite inheriting considerable talent, had a personality very much like Aunt Kushina's impulsiveness. Before he could unleash his would-release ability, Chinatsu had defeated him countless times with simple traps. And every time he challenged her, he'd only resort to these few bold words. But she wasn't annoyed. After all, even among so many children, there weren't many such tireless idiots. With a delicate bend of her calf, she performed a nimble handspring, her motor skills rivaling anyone else's, and she easily landed on the stone table in the courtyard. Why don't you attack quickly? She slightly stepped away, her left hand resting on her slender waist. She proudly lifted her perfectly smooth chin, revealing her swan-like neck. That's where the master drinks every day, someone in the shadows thought. Ugh, if we don't resolve this quickly, it'll be terrible if someone comes back and sees, another person in the shadows lamented. However, the two brats, ready for battle, naturally didn't care so much. After repeated provocations, Naruto finally couldn't stand it anymore. He extended his index and middle fingers, then crossed his hands. Shadow Clone Jutsu. From the original story, Naruto's signature ninjutsu still looked incredibly powerful, though not as dramatic as creating thousands of clones in an instant, but for someone so young to be able to perform such a complex, physical clone jutsu was commendable. But Chinatsu, standing across from him, was unfazed. Was that all he could do? The smile that curled up her lips was strikingly similar to that of young Shinayu back then. Although Shinayu had never shown this disdain to little Chinatsu, as the daughter of Senju Shinayu, as the strongest descendant of the ninja world. This disdain had been perfectly inherited, an air of arrogance and dominance, though at this moment, it still seemed so immature. Sharingan, activate. Although Chinatsu was confident she wouldn't lose even without relying on this newly acquired power, her mother had warned her that the Sharingan's power needed to be mastered through repeated use and to unleash its true power. In that case, let's change her tactics this time. While she couldn't yet summon vast forests to aid her like her father, even without the need for hand seals. For Chinatsu, being able to influence existing trees was the limit of her capabilities. This was why the armed uprising in the forest had earned her the reputation of 1 against 100, however, due to her innate advantages and bloodline and Shinayu's training since childhood. I mean, the training in wood release. Ahem, now Chinatsu can easily transform parts of her body into wood. While her chakra control and her training in yang release energy haven't yet stymied her ability to materialize a wooden pillar with decisive destructive power, and even its appearance is just a bare, broken piece of wood, for a kid like her, This power is already quite formidable. Therefore, in previous battles, facing Naruto's shadow clones, Chinatsu has always shattered them one by one with absolute dominance. For Naruto, who hasn't mastered other ninjutsu, both clones and the original body are limited to close-range physical attacks. But this time is different. While activating the Sharingan does consume more chakra than simply using would release Avatar, the increased kinetic vision, mobility, and keen chakra perception that comes with it greatly enhances Chinatsu's combat capabilities. Naruto's clone technique is like a lantern in the dark night for Chinatsu, it offers no deceptive effect at all. So this time, Chinatsu decides to go all in. With her speed and movement frequency significantly increased, she nimbly dodged all the clone sniping attacks and rushed to Naruto's front almost unhindered. Tisk tisk, that's all it was after all. Just as Chinatsu was about to secure her 234th victory against Naruto in a duel, a smile flashed in his azure eyes, suddenly making Chinatsu nervous. A man like Naruto was definitely not suited to conspiracy, as he always revealed his true intentions without warning. What could it be? Chinatsu didn't feel like she'd missed anything, and the battle had lasted this long, so it seemed the outcome should be decided. In a split second, Chinatsu's mind was unable to think further. Following her body's instinct, she delivered a powerful punch, sending Naruto flying, allowing him to make close contact with the ground. Naruto couldn't avoid the swift blow and, as usual, flew straight out of the air. But Naruto, still in midair, smiled triumphantly, forming a simple hand seal with his hands, then clenched them tightly. This battle is destined for his victory. Not. A lavender halo suddenly shone from the edge of Chinatsu's clothing, completely enveloping little Chinatsu in the blink of an eye. Ninjutsu, Amaji Hokage. Swoosh. Swoosh, two blasts of wind ripped through the air, almost instantly reaching the lavender halo. Reikiri. Chakra scalpel. The brilliance of a truly powerful warrior suddenly burst forth. Compared to this, the duel just now was nothing more than childish play. And yet, these incredibly powerful attacks were both directed at Chinatsu, trapped within the barrier. Or rather, the Amaji Hokage that trapped Chinatsu. With Master Shinayu and Master Minato gone, the situation was truly dire. P.S. By now, everyone should be able to tell this wasn't just childish play. Who were those two individuals who suddenly burst forth? And what exactly was Naruto-kun's final trump card? Hey! Doesn't anyone think that the name of this ninjutsu is actually a bit similar to previous ninjutsu? Chapter 238, A False Alarm. Reikiri. Chakra scalpel. The brilliance of a truly powerful being suddenly burst forth. This wasn't just talk. Both Kakashi and Jinchuriki unleashed their maximum attack power in the shortest possible time. Tenga Hokage. This powerful ninjutsu, developed by the Anbu, Shinayu, and Minato's personal guards, but witnessed by no more than 10 people, is a vivid memory for both men. First, a pale purple halo, then suddenly expanding into a perfectly square shape. This ninjutsu, devoid of any other markings, looks like a common ceiling or barrier technique, but once witnessed, it's unforgettable. What terrifying power does this ninjutsu possess? While it's unclear why Naruto can so easily master a ninjutsu supposedly reserved for Minato-sensei, young Naruto definitely doesn't possess the same control as Minato-sensei. So, they must break it. They must break it before it fully develops. Chi, the powerful attacks finally struck simultaneously from different directions. Although the two children were stunned, or perhaps completely unable to react, before they could make any move, the powerful attacks finally collided with the inconspicuous purple barrier. No, or should I say through? There was no obstruction at all, not even the sound of an explosion. Whether it was Kakashi or Uin, their attacks passed through the barrier without any thought. No, perhaps through is not the right word. They didn't even enter the interior of the barrier. Their attacks, even their arms and bodies suddenly appeared from the other side of the cube. It was as if the barrier in the middle, about 2 meters square, didn't exist in the first place. Retreat. With force on his feet, the two figures that suddenly appeared retreated behind him at the same speed. Are they still a step too late? Teacher Kakashi, brother Uin. For the two kids who were still fighting, they obviously did not expect Uin and Kakashi to appear at this time. After all, no matter how noisy they were, the two kids knew that although the extent of their usual fighting with each other was far beyond the level of ordinary children, it was also tacitly accepted by their parents. Generally speaking, even if Naruto was punished badly every time and sent home, no one would come out to stop it. Why today? Ah. Teacher Kakashi. You can't do this. I finally get a chance to win. Naruto came back to his senses and immediately pointed at the two people who suddenly joined the battle. Obviously, he was very indignant about this method of helping the opponent to cheat. Stop messing around, Naruto. Kakashi's voice suddenly grew stern. After all, in Naruto's mind, this teacher, sent by his father to teach him some basic ninjutsu, was incredibly lazy. What? Naruto folded his arms, tilted his head, and pouted. You're cheating, Naruto? Kakashi's voice grew even more urgent. Hurry up and show me this jutsu. He hadn't finished his words when the previously peaceful and silent Amaji suddenly trembled. This sudden change practically broke the two bodyguards into cold sweat. But after that, the barrier didn't change for the worst. Instead, it shattered like fragile foam, ultimately, turning into a scattered scroll. What was going on? Tisk. Naruto sat down helplessly. I finally managed to get one out of Dad's study. Almost immediately, the four-leaf clover pendant Naruto wore, hand-picked by his mother, began to heat up slightly. The next moment, Minato, wearing the symbolic Hokage's divine robe, appeared behind him with a dark look on his face. The Fourth Hokage struck him in the back of the head. The powerful knife hand directly cut into Naruto's little head. It hurts, Naruto? Little son's voice was terribly low. And who, as the shadow of a village, would have the urge to go home and beat up his unfortunate boy when he was about to show the ninjutsu scroll he had just developed at a high-level meeting, the kind with only a few people, and found that the scroll itself had been replaced and there was a doodle of his own son on it. And Minato, holding the Flying Thunder God and Naruto's spatial coordinates, immediately put his idea into practice. I should have warned you not to touch things in the study casually. I'm sorry. Father, even though he was famous for his good temper, Minato really had nothing to say to his naughty son. Wait. The familiar ninjutsu scrolls were scattered all over the floor, and standing in the middle of the scroll was the tearful little Chinatsu. By the way, Princess, when did you finish switching expressions? You were clearly showing a look of disdain and dissatisfaction just now. Naruto, you didn't do anything drastic to Chinatsu-chan, did you? Absolutely not, like secretly taking Daddy's ninjutsu scroll and using it on Chinatsu-chan, or something like that. Minato took the time to shyly soothe Chinatsu-chan, who was already sobbing, with a soothing and apologetic look. Then he lowered his head, staring at Naruto, who was trying to sneak away, with scarlet eyes radiating an infinite black aura. You definitely didn't do that, did you? He suddenly sat up straight and bowed deeply. Gumenes. He really did it. Minato slapped himself in the face. Even though it was just a scroll used for lectures and didn't possess the original properties of the jutsu, at most, it could only embed it into space, with absolutely no lethality. But since this had happened, he looked at his son with resentment. How am I going to explain this to that bastard Senju Shinryu? The two bodyguards who witnessed the entire process could only sigh helplessly. Phew. Fortunately, it was just a false alarm. PS, second update. Asking for everything, asking for support from local tyrants. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 239, New Pattern. For the next generation of Konoha who are still little kids, whether it is the village they live in or the entire ninja world, there are only some minor differences from what they have seen in history books. But in fact, in the past 5 years, Konoha, or the entire ninja world, has undergone tremendous changes. From the perspective of the ninja world, the biggest change is the cooperation mechanism between the major countries and ninja villages. The truth cannot be hidden, and there are some rumors about the inauguration of Fire Daimyo Fujiwara Ritsuko. However, after the dust settled, Ritsuko would not care about such things at all. The forces hypnotized by the Sharingan had already been replaced, and the current Fire Country is completely united. Of course, it would not be a few rumors that really caused the changes. What prompted all this was the attack on the Fire Country. As the Fire Daimyo, Ritsuko protected the ninjas of Konoha village, while other ninja forces strangled their targets. If it happened in a ninja village, such an incident might only cause dissatisfaction among the two villages, but this incident happened in the Fire Daimyo's mansion. Politicians smelled danger, The political system that has always been isolated from the ninja world began to be threatened by the power of ninjas. Under these circumstances, the relationship between the major ninja villages and their overlords began to shift. The forms of cooperation between the two sides, influenced by various objective factors, began to shift to varying degrees. Following this trend, perhaps within 50 years, the boundaries between ninja villages and major powers will blur once again, leading to final unification. It's nothing. This disconnect between a nation's military and political power is inherently abnormal. Of course, Konoha's immense strength also sparked a new round of conflict among the major powers. Within Konoha, the Hokage's control was further strengthened. While the primary force remained comprised of the official ninja system and the Anbu, the personal relationship between Minato and Shinayu led to gradual unification of the root and the remaining Anbu. This meant that the previous system of command priorities, where Shinayu was superior to the root captain and then to the Hokage, was restructured. After all, under the previous system, the Hokage had little control over the root. But as it stands, with Shinayu as the sole commander, Minato has effectively become the supreme commander of the root. This most significant change also indicates that Konoha village is considering a change in the direction of centralization. The advantages of doing so are naturally needless to say. Whether it is the financial resources of the entire village or the armed forces, the meaningless losses will be reduced to a minimum, and after gaining absolute dominance, other interest groups in the village that were suppressed by Shinayu and were struggling to breathe also began to move closer to Minato with no choice. This is also the reason why Shinayu had previously been ruthless to other small and medium-sized forces within the village. And as a leader, as the fourth-generation Hokage, Namikaze Minato has indeed demonstrated his leadership ability to the world in the past few years. Minato, who uses both kindness and force and is full of affinity, has minimized the drawbacks of this autocratic system with only one dominant party. In other words, the current Minato is basically equivalent to a wise leader in the feudal autocratic period. Konoha village naturally gradually became stronger under his leadership. Shinayu naturally had his own reasons for implementing this policy. Perhaps, given the overall trend of history, reverting from a democratic regime similar to a multi-party system to a feudal autocracy wasn't appropriate, but it was undeniable that this structure was best suited to the current situation, or rather, the changes that were about to take place over a decade from now. The war was far from over. Thwarting Uchiha-Iri's plot could only be considered a short-term victory at best. Under such circumstances, no one knew when peace would be shattered. And to cope with war, absolute unified command was essential. Distributing orders from multiple sources was always a recipe for death. And it wasn't just that. In fact, while this approach strengthened Minato's control over Konoha, it also freed up Shinayu's time and space. He had never considered himself suited to being a politician. In fact, up to this point, all he had done was use his extraordinary power to force his own politics. That's why he never denied Eagle's nickname of him, a political hooligan. So, he chose to let go, leaving everything to the person he considered most suitable, Minato. Whether in terms of personal strength, background, or influence, Minato was the perfect candidate for Hokage. Of course, the fourth Hokage here wasn't just a symbolic title. The title itself would carry absolute authority and power in the future. Meanwhile, Shinayu gradually weakened his influence within the village. After all, no matter how he explained it, no matter what the reason, the sight of wood release rampaging through the village that day had deeply wounded the villagers. However, due to Shinayu's previous achievements in his own strength, the villagers held a sense of awe towards him. In other words, if he hadn't stepped forward, the village would have gradually lost sight of Senju Shinayu's influence. Hiding in the darkness is the true root of Konoha. Under these circumstances, enjoying privileges while not directly standing out, Shinayu had the perfect opportunity to grow stronger. He had repeatedly asked himself, if Minato hadn't been there that day, would he have truly surrendered and accepted defeat? Just because Kyoko Sugetsu lost the initiative, could wood release surrender? No. That's not the case. If he is really strong enough to be fearless, just like the first generation back then. If he is no longer able to borrow that divine power, will he still fail? No. If he can really do that, he will be fearless, he will transcend the rules and become the new rules. Everything he wants to protect will be in his palms, and everything that attempts to destroy will be destroyed. No longer relying on anyone. Even if he is alone, he must protect everyone behind him. Be it Waki, Minato, his parents, Chinatsu, He will never let them go through any unnecessary storms again. P.S. Third update. Keep asking for support. Chapter 240, for the final victory. Of course, wanting to become stronger isn't just talk. You can't defeat the enemy with just words. Uchiha Madara isn't the Chinese national football team. The fundamental difference between the two is that while both use their mouths to blow, the results are vastly different. Ahem, I've gotten off topic. The point I'm making is simply that all these years haven't been wasted on Shin'ai. How was it this time? Shin'ai sat quietly behind the massive instruments. Beside him, a man in a traditional Japanese kimono was constantly busy. Tisk, tisk, the results aren't in yet, but it's a lot better than before. Although he was now a traitor, Shin'ai hadn't concealed Orochimaru's affairs from Minato. Though a righteous man, he might not accept all of Orochimaru's experiments, but Minato wasn't a stubborn person. Besides, Shin'ai hadn't offered to exonerate Orochimaru. The crimes had already been exposed, and there was no turning back. Of course, neither Shin'ai nor Orochimaru cared about that. They could just keep hiding in the shadows and cause as much trouble as they wanted. For convenience, Orochimaru would periodically travel to Konoha via secret routes to continue his research with Shin'ai. Of course, 4 years had passed. Although much of his time had been spent accompanying Wasabi and Shinatsu, Shin'ai had spent the few moments he had left training relentlessly. It wasn't just physical training in the conventional sense. The training Shin'ai was attempting was far more dangerous. Even calling it Shura Purgatory wouldn't be an exaggeration. Ding ding, the machine's analysis was finished, and various data were displayed in the form of a table in front of Orochimaru. Tisk tisk tisk, no matter how many times I look at it, it's still a monster's physical data. Shin'ai-kun, you are simply a tailed beast in human skin now, stop talking nonsense. Shin'ai shook his head impatiently. Has there been any further progress after the theoretical verification, huh? Orochimaru nodded affirmatively. Judging from the data this time, there are signs of peace. It's just that the body's tolerance is still not enough. There is still a long way to go before becoming a true sage. What if we use the curse seal? No, Orochimaru shook his head. Your physical strength is already quite high now, coupled with your proficiency in the use of Senjutsu. It is difficult for physical transformation based on Senjutsu chakra to have any obvious effect. After thinking for a moment, Orochimaru concluded, extend the safety time to 30 seconds at most. 30 seconds. Is it worse than before? At least on the surface, during his battle with Uchiha Irie, Shin'ai had already perfectly wielded two energies simultaneously for over 5 minutes. But now, only 30 seconds? Yet, Shin'ai smiled. It was completely different from then. This was a completely different story. From that moment of utter helplessness and instant death, now, Shin'ai was only a mere 30 seconds away from truly mastering this immortal power. Just one step away, and Shin'ai would possess the strength to rival the legend. Don't be too happy, said Snake, as always, at the most crucial moment. That last bit of improvement is going to be difficult. We've already exhausted all the methods we've learned to increase our strength. Now, we're truly clueless. That's enough. Shin'ai's eyes shone with a conviction that seemed to burn brightly. Compared to his initial confusion, at least he now had a clear direction, and as for the lack of a precise method, what path could possibly spell out the path to the future? The unknown is the joy, it instills a stronger desire to conquer. Ha, he chuckled. My problems will resolve themselves later, but you, Shin'ai looked at Orochimaru teasingly. Are you frustrated, Lord Orochimaru, that you haven't found a solution to the reincarnation jutsu? Using Shin'ai's life energy, Orochimaru conducted multiple reincarnation experiments on the same subject. It turned out that the soul gap began to appear around the 5th reincarnation. It wasn't just a matter of illusion resistance. Around the 23rd reincarnation, the harmony between soul and body began to weaken. Once reincarnations reached 30 or more, the soul was at risk of complete collapse, meaning death. This result enraged Orochimaru, perhaps due to his own negligence and carelessness. For a scientist, not discovering his own mistake, only to have someone else discover it first, it was a shame. After that, Orochimaru continued the research requested by Shin'ai while also accelerating the refinement of the reincarnation technique. The core concept remained unchanged: the soul is far more stable than the body. To achieve immortality, one must address the soul. But matters concerning the soul are indeed difficult. Even for someone of Orochimaru's level, he hadn't made a breakthrough in years. Tisk tisk, don't bother with that, Shin'ai-kun, Orochimaru's yellow eyes gleamed with a sharp light. I've recently come to a conclusion. Humans are like this, striving for their own goals, be it becoming stronger or achieving immortality. If you get hit hard by fate and then say okay, that's enough, that's impossible, it's like child's play. Image means nothing to them. Well, that's nothing to be surprised about. If you really want to get to the bottom of it, this is the essence of struggle. You can't become your true self unless you defeat something. You will do anything to achieve your ultimate goal, even if it means degrading yourself. Yes, humans have always been like this, samurai like this, ninjas like this. Victory is fickle by nature, and after these child's play struggles, only those who are the most unscrupulous can carve their own history on the ring. P.S. It's just a death wish. I cut my nails too short. It's so uncomfortable. Fourth update, continue to ask for everything. Chapter 241, Time, and Big Trouble. Leaving the root laboratory, Jinyoung took a deep breath and stretched gracefully. Before leaving, Jinyoung's teasing didn't disgust Snake, but instead reminded him of something, and he gave Jinyoung an ambiguous smile. When someone tried to question him further, Snake remained silent, only saying that one day the land of demons would cause Jinyoung big trouble, big trouble. He shook his head. Considering Miroku's personality, even though he hadn't visited her in recent years, he figured nothing would happen, right? After all, he had helped her solve the big problem of the demons. His confidence wasn't just because he now had the right path and direction compared to before. In fact, Jinyoung wasn't completely clueless about the path forward. Every time traveler was a broken-winged angel in their previous life. In other words, after traveling through time, there are always various advantages. What about Jinyoung? Of course, this was no exception. His Uzumaki bloodline granted him an innate reserve of chakra and powerful sealing techniques, while the Senju clan's legacy allowed him to awaken the power of Yang release. But these were all inherent powers of this world. For Shinryu, he would never forget the culprit that had brought him here, time. Compared to the classical definition of time, Shinryu, at least a college student, had a rough understanding of his own abilities. It could be said that his time abilities differed from the commonly understood concept of time. Even attempting to accelerate, decelerate, or even stop time was simply impossible to explain using traditional mechanics. Orochimaru had taught Shinryu the importance of theory, that no power is imaginary, and that without understanding its origins, it would be impossible to attain an unknown, greater power, even if that power had already existed throughout history. So, Shinryu began to ponder. Due to the inexplicably powerful wood release technique and the two energies constantly entangled within his body, he had briefly given up on further research into his time-traveling abilities. However, as his power continued to grow, he was forced to revisit this nebulous and mysterious realm of time. The development of quantum theory has raised even more fundamental questions about the concept of time. One of its conclusions is that the possible past states of a system depend on the choices made in present-day measurements. Therefore, unless the system's past states have already been recorded, its history cannot be considered to exist in the past, independent of present-day choices. Well, to put it more simply, the so-called future is merely a given and unknowable future. We can't accurately measure the state of a single particle, so we can't predict the future. But if we could, hypothetically, determine the current state of a particle at the next instant, then based on this detected state, we could naturally understand its state at a previous time. In other words, this way of thinking completely contradicts the existing causal theory of cause and effect. This led Jinyoung to ponder. As a human, he naturally visualized the ability to predict the future, or even control time, as controlling the flow of time. But from this perspective, perhaps Jinyoung's predictions are merely multidimensional predictions of possible future particle changes. The discrepancies between predicted and actual futures can be explained by the power of a higher dimension, that is, Senju Jinyoung himself, correcting the future. And so-called control of time is actually simply tampering with the rate at which particles are supposed to change. If he thought about it this way, Jinyoung came to a surprising conclusion. Yes, if that was the case, then could the so-called great prophecy also become possible? Unlike predicting the future, this time, he not only wanted to predict the movement of particles for a period of time, but to directly change it. Not just the speed and state, but also the direction, and even the initial trajectory of movement were all corrected. And if this approach was really feasible, it would almost be equivalent to the authority of a god. It's not that Jinyoung predicted the future, but because Jinyoung predicted it, such a future would exist. Is it true that what he said came true? Xianyang smiled bitterly and shook his head. This delusion was still too far-fetched. At least for him now, even if he wanted to complete something like stopping time, it was impossible to do it. At most, he could only get infinitely close. But this does not mean that for Xianyang, the ability of time is just a pipe dream. As mentioned at the beginning, the urgent problem that needs to be solved now is the mutual buffering of the two energies in the body. Then, the ability of time can be of great help. The science and technology in the Naruto world is simply impossible to reach such a high level, so Uncle Orochimaru and Xianyang are currently doing, but through large-scale unit experiments and the characteristics of the wood-release clone, to understand on what kind of platform the two energies can spontaneously coexist, and then according to this data, passively increase the strength of the body to adapt to the intense energy impact before reaching the standard value. But Xianyang wasn't satisfied with this. After understanding the macroscopic conflict and transformation of energy, Xianyang had an even crazier idea. Because of the sole determinism of his time ability, even wood-release clones couldn't use the power to control time. In other words, only the original body could control time. Given this, Xianyang decided to take a slight risk. Using his own body as a laboratory, he would utilize inherent time control to slow down time, using a more microscopic, smaller amount of energy to offset it. Simultaneously, he would use his foresight to find the most suitable collision method. That's right, with the help of two time-related abilities, Xianyang could reduce this seemingly impossible infinite experiment to a humanly acceptable level. No big deal. His gaze drifted off into the unknown distance. Whether it took 5 years or 10, there would be a day of success. P.S. First update. Chapter 242, Spy? Finally, some sex scenes have begun. The previous few chapters were some things that had to be explained, and now it seems that most of them have been explained. The following details will be hidden silently and invisibly in the main text, just like before, so please pay attention. Among the many major countries in the ninja world, there is a country that can definitely be called a maverick. Except for the 3 world wars that just ended not long ago, this country rarely intervenes in the disputes between other major countries, and most of the time it is not afraid of threats from other major countries. That's right, in a corner of the continent, there is such a huge island country, its name is the Water Country. And as expected, as one of the 5 major countries, in order to defend its own country, the Water Country also has its own armed forces Mist Ninja. However, not to mention now, after 3 wars and the deaths of the 7 ninja swordsmen, even before the war, Konoha probably would not take the Mist Ninja seriously. Apart from the Sand Ninja who have been weak for many years and suppressed by Konoha, the Mist Ninja who live in the island country on the sea also cannot have the strength to stand shoulder to shoulder with the heroes. And it is reasonable that the major ninja villages, including Konoha village, plant insiders and spies in other villages, usually mainly from the Land of Earth and the Land of Lightning. As for the Sand Ninja and the Mist Ninja, in terms of importance, they are not enough to attract attention. But this reality began to change as Konoha village officially entered the Twin Age. At Shinayu's suggestion, Konoha village, contrary to its usual practice, began to strengthen its surveillance of the Sand and Mist Ninjas. The situation had changed, and nothing could continue as planned, at least for Konoha, it was simply a matter of fact. For Konoha, with Minato and Shinayu, the other great powers of the ninja world had gradually lost their former threat. Even if war were necessary, it wouldn't be surprising if Konoha could take on the entire ninja world. After the Third World War, Konoha village, or rather, the Fire Nation, had risen to a terrifying position. Conquering the world was a matter of a thought. But neither Konoha nor the Fire Nation responded. Because, for them, the true enemy had shifted its focus. Indeed, for the Akatsuki hidden in the shadows, or for Madara, who awaited his resurrection, other problems were of little concern. Although it is certain that Chihiko was still alive at least until the attack, but due to the force field, Shinayu can no longer communicate with him further. Therefore, Shinayu has no good way to prevent Madara's resurrection. He can only waiting for the other party to reveal a flaw, but on the other hand, judging from the fact that the target of that action was still aimed at Kushina, the other party's ultimate plan should still be the Eye of the Moon. If so, the tailed beasts will become the main target of the other party's attack in the coming period. Although Konoha, as the first affected country, has issued a warning to the ninja world, but after all, it is still uncertain how much vigilance this matter, which does not concern them, will arouse. In the original work, Shinayong would certainly not forget that Obito used Uchiha Madara's identity to control the land of water. Although he was not sure that Iori would do the same, if he wanted to seize the tailed beasts, it would undoubtedly be easiest to start with the Sand Ninja or the Mist Ninja. In this situation, Konoha's elite spy team began to act. How to say it? If we wait another 10 years to see the lineup of this action, it would definitely be called luxurious. Huh. Yuchi, if you keep slacking off like this, you'll be dead if the boss finds out. This is just an ordinary secret post inside the Sand Village. Under normal circumstances, it won't make much difference whether there is anyone guarding it or not, so in order to cope with one person on duty for about 8 hours, the young man called Yuchi usually brings a pillow. Stop talking nonsense. He wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth, still looking like he hadn't woken up yet, but in response to his companion's teasing, Yuchi Hirata instinctively retorted, "Who'll know if you don't tell others?" Then he looked like he suddenly woke up, jumped up angrily, and strangled the other person's neck. I'm wondering why the captain found out last time. Tell me, was it you who reported him? Hey, the man struggled hard and shook his hand innocently. Please, it was just a routine check last time, okay? Who can I blame if they found you? Tisk. Yuchi curled his lips in disdain. Just because you say so, I believe it. Believe it or not, I'm telling you, the captain's out early again today. If he sees us messing around here, he'll definitely get a beating. Am I afraid of him? Despite his harsh words, Yuchi quickly let go of the other man, straightened his clothes, and turned to leave. Yuchi rolled over and left his sentry position, pillow under his arm, yawning as he walked towards his temporary home. Passing by a street newsstand, he nonchalantly picked up a newspaper and flicked a coin into the other person's change box. Time passed quickly, and the two people who passed by each other seemed to have no connection at all. That's right. Who had studied the stack of newspapers to see if one page was slightly different from the others? Who would care if a piece of change thrown casually contained a secret? And history, and even the future, it is through these small, unnoticed pathways that continuously transmit, heading in unpredictable directions. P.S. Second update. Please give me everything. Chapter 243, A Tiger in the Heart, Sniffing the Roses. I'm back no matter how hard the day's work was. When Zenayong returned to his nest, he would first be healed, and then give his family a sunny and happy smile. Master, many years have passed, and although Yuin no longer kneels at the door to welcome the master like she did when she was a child, because of the kindness she showed that day, even though she has grown up, Yuin still stubbornly serves as Zenayong's deputy, guarding the Senju clan all day long. Yuin, let's go eat first. She was a femme for 20 years in her previous life. What about this life? It was not easy to be born in a wealthy family, but for Shinai, who was used to fighting on the edge of a knife on the battlefield, Eugen's respectful attitude was something he could not get used to. Although after years of training, Eugen finally stopped kneeling down at every turn, but this respect was already far beyond Shinai's expectations. He was really being worshipped. Come back. After little Chinatsu was able to take care of the house independently, Shinai and Eagle discussed it and, like Minato, moved out of the old house. It's not that mom and dad didn't take good care of them. In fact, it was quite the opposite. No matter whether it was Chinatsu or Naruto, the old couple were simply afraid that they would melt if they held them in their mouths, and afraid that they would drop them if they held them in their hands. Young people naturally have their own educational principles, and the two little guys were destined to be born in the cruel world of ninjas, so the two moved out. Well, but judging from the actual situation, Shinai's love for little Chinatsu was even greater than that for Mom Mizuho. Ahem, that's not the point. The key point is that after leaving the old house, although the old couple were not far away, the heavy responsibility of preparing 3 meals a day naturally fell on the shoulders of the mother, Wasi. Although sometimes Shinai would guest cook once or twice, most of the time, Wasi was still in charge of the family. So, when Shinayu came back, Wasi, who was still busy in the kitchen, poked her head out, and the old couple smiled in tacit understanding. I'll take Chinatsu to the restaurant to wait for you. Yes, it must be said that, at least in the eyes of outsiders, Wasi is indeed a model family wife who can both be a good wife and a good cook, especially after having little Chinatsu. No matter what she, as the head of the Uchiha clan, has to do, she will definitely take good care of the little ones 3 meals a day. Compared to the ladylike attitude when teaching little Chinatsu tea art and flower arrangement, diligence and capability are actually the normal state of this mother in her daily life. At the dinner table, The family enjoyed themselves in a joyful atmosphere. After all, compared to Kushina, Washi seemed to have a greater talent for cooking. Naturally, Shinayu didn't have to endure the arduous task of preparing a plethora of unconventional dishes like Minato had for the past 2 years. Later, Yuan had already prepared the bath water for everyone. According to family rules, Shinayu should have been the first to bathe, but firstly, he wasn't one to follow the rules, and secondly, he doted on his youngest daughter beyond measure. So, in the Senju household, it was always Chinatsu who bathed first. In the Japanese-style room, Shinayu gently embraced his wife, admiring the beautiful starlight together. "What are you thinking about?" He reached out and gently stroked Shinayu's brow. Between them, words were no longer necessary. A single glance was enough to understand each other's feelings. Therefore, even concealing one's feelings was not easy. "Nothing," Shinayu shook his head. After a moment's hesitation, he finally spoke. "It's nothing serious. I was just wondering if it wasn't a good idea to send Itachi and Shisu on a mission like this so early in the morning. Isn't that kid the same age as them?" Shinayu choked, then sighed helplessly. Though it sounded a bit heartless, it was the truth. He's different. He and Nono were destined for the same fate. Then how can you see through their fate? Washi usually spoke little, but her voice was clear and gentle, leaving Shinayu with no reason to argue. At this point, what was the point of talking about fate? Those who were supposed to die, those who were supposed to go mad, those who were supposed to be powerful. So much was supposed to change because of his appearance, and because of everything he had done, more possibilities were now before everyone. Now, how could there even be any such thing as fate? Ah, you have a point. I'm just worried the storm might be too strong, too sudden. Eagle shook her head. That's not like what Senju Shinayu said back then. She paused, her warm hand resting against Shinayu's heart. Back then, we'd all been through storms, even life and death, more than once. Back then, it was because we had no shelter. One day, they'll have to stand on their own. No, Shinayu tightened his grip slightly, as if trying to encase the person in his arms. I wish they could remain children forever. After all these years together, how could Eagle not know what Shinayu was thinking? All she could do was gently poke Shinayu's cheek. You always like to act so strong, huh? But you just said. Shinayu's gaze reached the heavens. One day, he would ascend to the immortal peak and protect the tenderness of this world. Because I'm Senju Shinayu, arrogant and unruly words are the greatest charm of this man. Eagle, what's wrong? Let's take a shower together later. Hate. P.S. The third update asks for everything. Chapter 244, Conspiracy. Join the organization? You think I'd have such a taste for it? Even though the 7 ninja swordsmen were now few in number, Maingetsu Kazuki had never wavered. He was fundamentally different from them. Even when the others were still alive, Maingetsu had dared to say this. As the youngest of the 7 ninja swordsmen, no one dared to deny that he was undoubtedly the strongest. A genius of the Hazuki clan, even more terrifying than the prematurely deceased Hazuki Kaiu. Whether it was the degree of his awakened bloodline, his age, or his extraordinary chakra, he was a prodigy capable of reaching the rank of Kage. And, to top it all off, there was also his mastery of the 7 ninja swordsmen. Indeed, the only ninja among the 7 ninja swordsmen who could wield all 7 at will was this young man before him, and yet, today, a rare figure stood in his way. Not even a fellow villager would have had such courage. Having reached the rank of elite Jonin at such a young age, Maingetsu Hazuki perfectly inherited everything from the Hazuki clan, including the warlike nature and bloodlust that runs deep in his blood. Furthermore, the words spoken by the man before him were enough to stir Maingetsu's murderous intent. I'll ask you one last time. The voice was deep and emotionless. The conspicuous robe with a black background and red clouds cast a chilling chill in the dead of night, and the conical hat on his head made it even more difficult to fathom his true nature. Will you walk back with me on your own, or do you want me to send you back? Though it was impossible to discern the anger in his tone, two things were certain. The visitor's patience had reached its limit, and secondly, he possessed immense confidence in his own abilities. So, what else was there to say? Without another word, Maingetsu coldly drew the hirame flounder from his back. For Maingetsu Hazuki, a genius feared even by his own clan, the sword was his only companion, the only friend he would never betray. A single thought in his mind led to a ruthless attack. The man before him placed immense pressure on him. Under such circumstances, Man Yu knew only by striking relentlessly from the outset could he stand a chance of victory. Water transformation. A jutsu is similar to Mizukami Kiri, but instead of using water arrows to injure, Man Yu now possessed a bloodline, imbuing him with a sense of casualness and murderous intent. Speedy advance. Physical combat was a matter of speed, strength, and precision. For Man Yu, no matter what, he could not afford to let his opponent seize the initiative. The sword drew closer. The splashing water had already soaked the hem of the man's clothing. Murderous intent surged in with the sound of a deadly wind. Just before the blade reached him, the man merely raised his head slightly. Beneath his bamboo hat, a pair of scarlet eyes radiated a terrifying power. Clang, the long sword landed. The outcome was decided. Meanwhile, in the Hokage building, two pioneers who could be called the founders of an era were chatting and laughing. In such an unguarded conversation, who could have predicted that the contents of their conversations were filled with secrets? Things haven't been going well lately. Shinayu shook his head helplessly. To counter the enemy in the dark, or at least to find a way to counter Uchiha Iri's Kyokusu Jetsu, the two had collaborated on a jutsu several years ago. Granted, if it were simply to counter illusions, especially those of the Kyokusu Jetsu type, the jutsu would be considered impeccable, but neither Shinayu nor Minato had a goal beyond that. There's no rush. Minato could only shake his head helplessly, looking at his languid friend. As Hokage, his daily headaches were far more than just that. While he had never given up on his training, he could undeniably be distracted by other things. The chakra problem has been solved. The problem now is that there is no reference material to test for talent. It will take a long time to succeed if we just try blindly. Minato smiled bitterly. How could he not know about Shinayu's complaints? But no matter what, the talents of the two were really too rare. So much so that even ordinary bloodline limits could not be used as a reference. Let's not talk about this for now. Minato waved his hand, his expression turned serious as for the Mist Village. It's okay. Shinayu curled his lips indifferently. Although whether it was you or anyone else, they were probably not easy to deal with, but no matter which angle you look at it from, the guy who was raised by Orochimaru was born with a rebellious mind. It would be a waste if he didn't become a traitor. And not only that. With that wandering shrine maiden by his side, there won't be any trouble. Chapter 245, Black Background and Red Clouds. Clang, the long sword fell to the ground. The outcome was decided. How could it be so quick and easy? Kabuto didn't know the identity of the newcomer, but Maingetsu Ozuki had always been one of his targets. He had thought his suspicion second only to the defected Seven Swordsman, Kisame, but he had never expected to actually meet him in this way. What a terrifying eye power! Though they were far apart, that one glimpse had already shocked Kabuto. Maingetsu Ozuki, the Jounin of the Mist, if one truly considered combat prowess, was undoubtedly one of the top 5 in the Mist Ninja. Little did he know that he couldn't even withstand a single glance against the newcomer. That's right, from beginning to end, it was all just that one glance. The Hazuki clan possesses the water transmutation technique, which allows them to transform into liquid form at will. Given this bloodline, combined with the opponent's previous attack, it shouldn't be a direct offensive ability. Even based on Kabuto's observations over the years with Orochimaru, only a very few bloodlines are capable of such a feat. Of these, the most questionable is the Sharingan, which originated from Konoha. But is this possible? Kabuto, adopted by Yakashi Nono since childhood, only caught Orochimaru's eye several years ago. Orochimaru admired the child's intelligence and maturity more than his natural ninja training. After much negotiation, Minato reluctantly agreed to let Orochimaru take Kabuto with him. It wasn't until a year ago, after completing his training, that Kabuto returned to the village and continued to serve as a liaison between Orochimaru and Konoha. During this period, Kabuto learned many things that ordinary ninjas could never know, including, of course, the fateful night of the clan's genocide. The Sharingan is a bloodline ability unique to the Uchiha clan, and shouldn't Konoha be the last of the Uchiha left now? Could it be Uchiha Iri himself? This thought terrified Kabuto. If that were the case, would he have been exposed? No. Now wasn't the time to dwell on these things. Better to get this message back as soon as possible. With a thought, Kabuto slowly left the hidden rock and began moving in the opposite direction. In the silent night, Kabuto's breathing became barely audible. What are you listening to? That deep, cold voice suddenly sounded from behind him. Almost at the same time, he suddenly leaped forward, avoiding the opponent's kunai, exposed. Little rat, the ordinary hat rose slightly, revealing a pair of scarlet eyes beneath. Just now, the distance was too far to see clearly. But now, the opponent's divine robe with a black background and red clouds was so eye-catching. As a spy, of course I have to have some necessary intelligence, such as this iconic outfit. Before the mission began, I had been repeatedly warned not to engage in head-on conflict with enemies dressed like this. Because that not only means exposure, but it is very likely that I will die immediately. Akatsuki, compared to the murderous situation in the Blood Mist, the Sand Village is much calmer. Itachi and Shisu both have strong psychological qualities, and Konoha has also put in a lot of effort to arrange for the two of them. In short, the backgrounds of both of them are very reliable. Furthermore, the two men didn't choose the ninja profession at the same time. While they were newbies, perhaps not as experienced as their predecessors, Itachi and Shisu were able to fully utilize their strengths. The Sharingan. As a ninja, Shisu, or rather, Hiratayuchi, didn't have many opportunities to use his powerful eye power, but for a spy, possessing such a powerful hypnotic tool was an undeniable advantage. To maximize the effectiveness of the Sharingan, Itachi didn't choose a ninja identity for himself. Instead, he transformed himself into a refugee from war and entered the Sand Village. Compared to the strict and rigorous ninja system, the management of civilians was much more relaxed. All they needed was an ID card and a confirmation stamp from any of the 5 major nations to enter, and Itachi had a lot of stock in this regard. Shisu naturally relied on gathering information about the ninja, while Itachi acted as a spy, hiding in the streets and alleys. Firstly, this facilitated the transmission of intelligence. Secondly, utilizing the Sharingan provided a fallback for the two. Finally, should they encounter an irreconcilable mortal threat, Itachi's presence could instantly resolve the crisis. Meanwhile, within the Sand Village, the two had observed nothing unusual. Given Konoha's strength and the painful experience inflicted upon the Sand Shinobi by Master Shinryu, any rebellion among them would be unlikely anytime soon. Furthermore, and crucial to this operation, neither Shisu nor Itachi had noticed any trace of the Akatsuki organization. Did they seem unhurried in attacking Shukaku, the weakest of all the tailed beasts? No, it was too early to tell. Both Itachi and Shisu understood that their mission was to remain firmly on the ground until further notice of the mission arrived. In reality, fate didn't keep them waiting much longer. Amidst the vast expanse of yellow sand, 2 figures of varying heights gradually approached. "Let's proceed according to the plan," she said indifferently, yet with a hint of allure. Her aura of a cold beauty shone through even through the thick divine robes and bamboo hat. HMPH, a low, muffled groan, though disdainful, forced the short yet sturdy figure to acquiesce in her command. P.S. Second update: it's been a few days since I've seen any tips, I've been missing them. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 246, Sudden Attack. P.S. Please recommend. Please reward. Before the mission began, I had repeatedly warned you not to engage in head-on conflict with an enemy dressed like this. Because that would not only mean exposure, you would most likely die right then and there. Zio. How could you possibly mistake that outfit with a black background and red clouds, a symbol of ominousness and destruction? And coming into contact with the other party at such a close distance is simply too dangerous. There are a lot of small fish tonight, the man spoke as if sighing. The lively Mainjutsu, who had just been flying around, was now on his shoulder, motionless. Was he dead? No, that alone wasn't enough to tell. Besides, considering this man's skill, waiting for Mainjutsu to leave the village for a mission solely to kill him would be a joke. Even though he knew he was outmatched, he had no intention of surrendering. Kabuto unsheathed his kunai from his ninja tool bag and calmly stared down his unknown opponent. Nice look, serious and cautious, but fearless? The other party clearly knew the danger, but even so, he still reacted like that. A sneer curled his lips. Young man, do you want to dance too? He removed the bamboo hat that had been obscuring his face, his proud hair fluttering in the wind. What was most terrifying was no longer his slowly turning crimson eyes, but a face revealed only in legends. You are, no luck next time. With a low hum, a burst of profound chakra energy erupted from his Sharingan. His formless and invisible illusions had already reached perfection. For the man before him, the vast ninja world was no match for him. Bang! A puff of smoke dissipated, and there was no trace of Kabuto anywhere. From beginning to end, it had all been a spectacle played out by his shadow clones. He hadn't expected his innocent pursuit to yield such a result. Ahem, in a small room farther away, Kabuto, who had been working on paperwork, suddenly felt dizzy. He was used to the after effects of dissolving his shadow clones, but this time, something was different. Those terrifying eyes seemed to appear before him. The moment they met his gaze, his entire body went numb, unable to move. Those terrifying pupils, suspended in the sky, instantly caused a surge of ki, and a mouthful of blood immediately flowed from his mouth and nose. So powerful. Regardless of the opponent's true identity, the fact that this illusion was still able to harm him despite the shadow clone's obstruction showed at least that the caster's illusion skills had reached an incredible level. It seemed no accident that the opponent had been able to defeat Meigetsu Uzuki in a single blow. No, it was more like the Mangekyo Sharingan was supposed to have this kind of power. After slightly suppressing his injuries, Kabuto began to worry again. Although the clone had used the transformation technique to change his appearance, it was still unclear how effective this crude disguise would be for the Sharingan user. More importantly, there shouldn't be many Uchiha with such strength. Of the Uchiha who left Konoha, the only one who possessed such profound skills was the fugitive Uchiha Irie. Was it Uchiha Irie? No. If I had to say, I believed that the other person's face would provide the most reasonable answer. He had a strange hatred for the ninja world, yet possessed a power beyond his time against his enemies. And that familiar face. All the clues pointed to the same answer, Uchiha. Madara, the dividing line of the Sans Shinobi crisis. Let's act according to the plan. HMPH, a low grunt, although disdainful, but at the moment, the short but fat figure had to acquiesce to her orders. As I got closer, I finally realized that the short figure was clearly different from ordinary people. The black scarf covered most of his cheeks, and his hair, compared to normal human hair, looked more like some kind of weapon ready to be used. Of course, the biggest problem was not this. If this could be said to be naturally ugly, then the tail hidden under the robe, swinging freely, could not be ignored so easily. Kalala, he walked across the sand step by step, and the long marks he left seemed even more eerie under the accompaniment of those strange sounds. He did not attack with the aggressive and fiery force of ordinary ninjas. Instead, he gave the impression of being more like a fortress of war. Steady and strong, he could instantly unleash terrifying power wherever he went. Behind him, Ivy smiled as the monster in front of her slowly advanced. The smile that bloomed at the corner of her mouth was cold and frightening. Legend has it that one person can destroy an entire country's war machine. Let me see it for myself. Chapter 247, Our Past. P.S. Fourth update, begging for everything. Regardless of others, Scorpion, following his own will, steadily approached the Sand Village. To him, this place was all too familiar, yet since birth, Scorpion had never felt the warmth he deserved. Puppetry, battle, talent, betrayal, none of it meant anything to Scorpion. And the simplest thing he longed for, he could never achieve, no matter what. All of this had shaped the Scorpion he was now, the cold, icy Scorpion. To achieve his goal, he even resorted to transforming into a human puppet. Physical life withers easily, so he transformed everything about himself into machinery, into something replaceable at any moment. If that were the case, he would naturally avoid pain. Chew, a dazzling whistle arrow was launched into the sky. Though it was a nighttime surprise attack, Scorpion had no intention of avoiding it. Approaching someone else's village so brazenly, it was only natural that he would attract attention. But that was his goal. He tilted his head in hatred. When designing the Feilyuhu, Scorpion obviously did not consider adding any mechanism that could express emotions, otherwise he would definitely spit fiercely at this moment. Just consider it the price he must pay. The cooperation with that woman has become a reality. Before the goal is achieved, we can only share the risk as a community of interests. But then again, facing the security forces rushing towards him, Feilyuhu did not react at all. Just like Scorpion himself, who had blocked himself with layers of barriers. Over the years, this group of trash really has not made any progress at all. The powerful Third Hokage made it impossible for them to see the way forward, so they were defeated. Now that the Third Hokage is long dead, what do they have to rely on to live so arrogantly? Is it just relying on the title of a great power? Anyway, you can only be taken away by others like this. Why not all of you stay here? The gloomy voice was even more desolate because of the obstruction of the black cloth, and when he spoke in this situation, there was a few more murderous intentions for no reason. Feiliuhu? Zhenbabo. The black cloth was lifted, and the ugly puppet's face was finally revealed, but those who saw and heard it could not help but sneer. From the big mouth with its lower jaw detached, countless flying needles as thin as cow hair suddenly shot out. Like a summer rainstorm, all the ninjas who rushed forward were shot down in the blink of an eye, but the deadly poison that had been prepared on the hidden weapons was no match for the cool rain that hit Zin. Anyone who touched it would die. The corpses of their companions told those who came later what kind of enemy they were facing. Be careful. The other party is a puppeteer. Uchihayu, who was watching the battle from afar, sneered. Even the Sand Ninja, who was known for being the best at using puppets in combat, would be in vain no matter how cautious he was when facing this guy. Who else would understand puppets better than puppets? But a cute look of embarrassment crossed the little girl's face. Mom is very ill, but Mom is still willing to tell me what Dad is. How do you expect me to answer this question? While Orochimaru was quite satisfied with the location of his base, and the funding and manpower, he was quite satisfied. His only complaint was probably this little girl, who was naturally not afraid of him, and her background. If he hadn't known the Miko's character, Orochimaru probably wouldn't have thought of his friend. But the facts before him made it impossible for him to disbelieve, especially when this child began to reveal her unique side, even though the Miko herself had never said a word to him. Should I call her a great woman, or a foolish one? Since your mother doesn't want to tell you, it proves it's not the right time yet. Why rush? The silence lasted only a moment. Orochimaru knew full well that this brat was being incredibly clever. Uncle, how long are you going to keep lying to me? She clenched her fists, tears streaming down her delicate, jade-like face. It's really because Dad doesn't want us anymore, right? Life is a cycle of yin and yang, and without a father, where would we be? It's said that the father was away on business and had no time to return, but how could a husband be away for 4 or 5 years, not even returning to visit his wife who was seriously ill? Either he was a jerk by nature, or he simply didn't want to recognize them. Whatever the case, such a father deserved no respect. At his age, even if he hadn't delved into family matters, how could Orochimaru not see through the girl's mind? Oh, well, it wasn't him who committed the sin after all. These things should only give the number 1 ninja in Konoha a headache. Don't cry. A rough hand brushed across the little girl's head. The slightly cold temperature unexpectedly revealed a rare warmth. Don't be sad, Shion. Tomorrow, I'll take you to see your father. Chapter 248, The Mantis Stalks the Cicada, unaware of the Oriole behind. P.S. Here comes the first update. Please give me everything Mua. At night, outside the Sand Village, shouts of killing shook the sky. This ninja world that has never been truly peaceful, there is no lack of struggle and death at any time. No matter who it is, such a curse is clearly the fate of the ninja. Shio-sama, the newcomer is covered with the wounds, is that right? Lord Kazekage, you want to win the sympathy of this old woman in this way? You don't know that this old woman is already heartbroken. The bloodshed and massacre brought by foreign enemies, do you still need my old bones to take action now? Lord Gai hopes you can help. The ancient books have been put away, the dragon has returned to the deep sea. I have long stopped caring about worldly affairs. Chiyo helplessly held a fishing rod in her hand. For her, after experiencing so many hardships, the meaning of war has long been blurred. My only hope is to see my grandson's smiling face again. Chiyo-sama, the ninja in charge of delivering the news paused for a moment, then finally, following the Fourth Hokage's instructions, spoke abruptly. Kei-sama said that the people who attacked the village this time were Scorpion of the Red Sand. The fishing rod slipped, the figure swayed. Before the ninja could react, Chiyo had vanished. Chiyo never left the sealed scroll in her arms. It was a long-cherished wish she had to fulfill, a cause and effect sown years ago. And now, though I don't know the reason, you've finally returned. If it really is you, this is perfect. Chiyo, you've lived long enough. In a corner of the village, the eye of sand slowly peeled away. Gai shook his head in frustration. If it weren't necessary, he wouldn't have dragged the Sand Shinobi's most senior and arguably most powerful puppeteer into the fray. Chiyo had already contributed greatly to the village, both in terms of contributions and achievements. But this war, however reluctant, was a necessity Chiyo had to enter. Overthinking was pointless. Since the disastrous defeat in the Third War, Giai had awakened from his dream of being a Sans shinobi superpower. Let alone confronting Konoha, even against the other great powers of the ninja world alone, the Sans shinobi village had absolutely no chance of victory. Now was no time for complacency and self-deception. Therefore, since Giai came to power, the Sans shinobi village had primarily tolerated and obeyed Konoha's demands, lowering its stance and seeking Konoha's assistance at all costs. Now, the Sans shinobi village was more of a vassal than an ally. With a sigh, he threw aside the sacred robe that symbolized the Kazakage. The tight-fitting combat suit, suitable for combat, returned to Giai's body once again. Near the heart of this combat suit, there was still a small gap. That was the golden glitter of Konoha, leaving him with a lifelong shame. He exerted force with his feet. His chakra was also immobilized to the peak. No matter what, as the cage of a village, he had reason to protect this village. Whether it was Scorpion or something else, he would never allow them to set foot in the Sand village. Follow me to meet the enemy. With a soft shout, countless black shadows streaked across the night sky. As for the target, of course, the enemy at the village entrance. Quickly, get out of the way, his cries were futile. The explosion, reeking of gunpowder and blood, seemed inevitable. Puppetry technique, blade manipulation. The kunai, initially menacing, were repelled by the Sans shinobi's attacks. Powerful strikes, perfectly timed parries and counterattacks. At this moment, even the Uchiha clan, renowned for their kunai-throwing prowess, dared not underestimate the adversary's exquisite skill. Tisk, finally, a troublemaker, no longer cloaked in darkness, Uchiha Irie, who had been observing from the sidelines since the beginning, finally entered the fray, standing firmly beside Scorpion. Sans shinobi, Chiyo, a little girl has no right to speak before me. Though she was growing old, Chiyo refused to yield, or rather, in front of her grandson, she refused to retreat. Irie smiled softly, covering her mouth. Unfortunately, I have no choice but to intervene today. 2 against 1? No, this is the Sand Village. An unknown organization actually dared to launch a violent attack on the Sand Village. A steady and terrifying voice came. Compared to many years ago, Giai is now a little more cold and patient. But it does not mean that he has lost the blood of defending his country. A warrior is willing to die in 100 battles, and Wu Jian is also calm. Let me be your opponent. He formed seals with his hands, and with a burst of chakra, the entire sand began to become restless. Everyone, I'll back off. From here on, it is a battle that truly belongs to the strong. Fourth Hokage, Giai is here. However, both warring parties seemed unaware of this. There was another young ninja hiding in the dark. Shisu. Listen up, activate the final plan. Itachi's voice was calm and deep, and he didn't sound like a teenager at all. But it was precisely because of this that so many people were optimistic about it. However, on the other side of the rock wall, where the battle between the Sand Shinobi and Sasori began, even Itachi and his men didn't know about it. Shinayu, who was still in Konoha, had already prepared the last line of defense for them. Old man, don't let me down. Chapter 249, The Battle of Puppet Masters. PS Second update. Keep asking for support on the battlefield, there's no respite. It's a life or death struggle. He unleashes an all-out attack. Is it to atone for his regrets, or to prove that his last stand along the way was not a mistake? Scorpion has long lost track of the truth, nor does he have the time to discern. Puppeteer instinct has replaced common sense. The battle between 2 generations of supreme puppeteers has begun silently. Kill. Scorpion's red sand hand is merciless. Compared to before, the Higurashi Amber is even more powerful, and the mechanisms all over his body are almost simultaneously clashing. Against Grandma Chiyo, Scorpion must not be complacent. Not to mention that it was the old woman before him who taught him the art of puppetry. Judging by her combat prowess alone, Chiyo now far surpasses the new generation of so-called puppeteers. The reason is self-evident. With limited vision, like a frog in a well, how can he possibly know the immensity of the world? Fei Liu, whose entire body trembled, instantly unleashing countless hidden weapons. Compared to Chiyo, fighting alone and on the enemy's doorstep, Scorpion was already at a disadvantage. But on the other hand, Without allies, Scorpion could act with abandon, without having to worry about the others. Chiyo, on the other hand, had to consider the sand ninja behind him. Secret technique, mechanical light shield seal. Forced to do so, even if the back of her was indeed less than satisfactory, Chiyo couldn't just sit back and watch them get killed and wounded. After all, the future belonged to the young. Retreat. Do not make contact with the ninja tools he launches. Contact means death. While facing a powerful enemy, Chiyo could only shout, hoping that the ninja behind her would quickly retreat. On a battlefield like this, without the strength of an elite Jonin or a unique skill, victory was impossible. Even if they tried to lend a hand, it would be a waste of their lives. When fighting against ordinary puppeteers, of course, you only need to find the main body and break through the weaknesses, but the two people in the battle are obviously not included in this category. Let alone whether ordinary people can break through the siege of the two puppets. Even if you rashly get close, you may not be able to get any advantage. Putting aside Chiyo, who has experienced the baptism of many battles, the Scorpion in front of him is a puppetry genius that has never been seen before and after. It's hard to imagine. Even if Feiliu is defeated, Scorpion can really only sit and wait for death? Chiyo, of course, doesn't believe it with concentration. But in this case, the current situation can't be delayed any longer. Glancing at the battlefield on the other side, the Fourth Hokage guy managed the offense and defense well, and had a basis for advance and retreat, but the woman fighting with him obviously didn't try her best. Even from the beginning of the battle until now, she has not made any special moves, just dodging blindly. If it were just an ordinary person, it wouldn't be a big deal. Given Guy's strength, he should be able to suppress them all the way. But the opponent possesses a pair of strange Sharingan. Countless predecessors have risked their lives to give this advice: when facing a high-level Sharingan user, never fight alone. With a Genjutsu eye above the third level, even if both sides are evenly matched, it's very likely to be affected if you're not careful. And facing powerful Genjutsu, if you're alone, you're almost certain to lose. Therefore, this battle on his side cannot be delayed. He must defeat his grandson as soon as possible. Then, this is the only way. Reaching out, the scroll hidden in her sleeve finally slipped out. The enemy in front of her continued to attack, so Chiyo didn't hesitate. She threw thousands of scrolls into the air, instantly finding an opening, and the long-sealed scroll slowly unfolded. This was originally a secret technique that I sealed with my own hands. I never thought that I would be able to use it again one day. Things are unpredictable. Chiyo shook her head speechlessly. The desire for power makes people greedy, and losing power will lead to bullying by foreign enemies. The strong are always a minority, so who can understand that truly possessing power is another kind of suffering and torture? Of course, the scroll contains more than just secret techniques. There are also compromises and pain. Her mind focused. Chiyo closed her eyes slightly, her mind cleared. Facing the enemy in battle, she had already committed a serious taboo by showing compassion. If she couldn't concentrate at this moment, today's battle might be her death. Bang! White smoke dissipated, and a brief silence descended upon the battle. In the blink of an eye, 10 strange figures finally stood scattered around Chiyo. The number of puppets a puppeteer can control determines their strength. Generally speaking, even with diligent practice, an ordinary puppeteer can only control one puppet. However, some are born with extraordinary talent and exceptional chakra control. With the guidance of the master, they can command 2 or 3 puppets in their youth. Such individuals are considered geniuses. And what the average person considers a strong person is just that. However, if one truly desires mastery and dominance through puppetry alone, such skills are far from enough. Back when the previous Hokage was still alive, the most powerful puppeteer in the Sand Village even possessed a puppeteer capable of controlling 5 puppets simultaneously. His single combat power was enough to annihilate an entire enemy squad. But even so, this puppet unit was still defeated by Konoha's White Fang. But when it comes to puppetry, there's one person in the Sand Village who must be mentioned, a supreme puppeteer capable of summoning the legendary masterpiece of the first puppeteer, Bunziman, to battle with the Chikamatsu 10. She possesses a 10-fingered count, unimaginable for ordinary people. Hence, she's known as the pinnacle of puppetry. Indeed, this person is none other than the old man standing before Scorpion. Chiyo. White secret technique, Chikamatsu 10. The following appears to be unrelated and likely a separate topic. Chapter 250, 10 versus 100. P.S. The third update has arrived. It's almost a new day, everyone. I hope you'll recommend this and give me generous rewards. The smoke dissipated, but the fierce murderous aura only grew stronger. Techniques unused for decades now found their place. Taboos, once buried by history due to the sheer volume of bloodshed, finally saw the light of day. A shadowy figure in the dark night, a cold glow lingered. Though his body remained motionless, the boundless chill was enough to stop anyone in their tracks. Controlling 10 puppets with a single person, such power is truly awe-inspiring and astonishing. You old immortal, you truly live up to your former fame. Though Feilu, whose expression was expressionless, his slightly different tone revealed the seriousness with which Scorpion regarded his foe. Indeed, only the ignorant are fearless. And as a puppeteer himself, how could he not know the true power of these 10 puppets, meticulously crafted by the first ancestor, Bunzeman? And how terrifying is the legendary 10-finger technique that can unleash its full power. However, understanding it does not mean fear, nor does it mean that Scorpion will retreat. Indeed, as long as they are puppeteers, no one will underestimate Chihayo, who can completely replicate Bunzeman's 10-finger number, but Scorpion is determined to leave a subversive mark in the history of puppeteers. 10 years ago, he was the most outstanding and talented puppeteer among the Sans shinobi. And today, 10 years later, Scorpion will prove that he is the strongest puppeteer. He cannot fail, and failure is not allowed. Now that the enemy is numerous and we are few, and with a master like Chihayo, Scorpion has no intention of hiding his weakness. Suddenly, the back of Filiwako split open, and light blue chakra threads spurted out of the sky like flowers scattered by a fairy. What is he going to do? Though no moves had yet been made, Chihayo knew the opponent was no pushover. As Scorpion's first puppeteer, no one knew better than her the true talent this former child possessed. Rather than a showdown, it was better to seize this opportunity and strike first. Family ties are intertwined, and the battlefield is no place for ruminations. Chihayo naturally forgot about these matters. On the battlefield, how could there be any reason to hold back? Kill. The mechanisms clicked, like the souls of the dead, 10 fingers moving in unison, the ultimate puppeteer, the most masterful puppeteer, a slight tremor, and then all 10 puppets activated, instantly charging the enemy. Kill. 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 Scorpion of the Red Sand faced the enemy calmly, the Scarlet Flow Amber possessing extraordinary abilities. In this critical moment, knowing that dodging would be suicidal, he had no choice but to fight. The tail swept out, sending dust and sand swirling through the air, obstructing vision. Simultaneously, countless razor-sharp thousand blades burst forth, aiming directly at Chihayo himself. But how could the Chikamatsu 10 men earn their reputation in vain? The original puppeteer's masterpiece boasted both offensive and defensive capabilities, further enhanced by Chihayo's commanding presence. First, one figure blocked the fine needles, then both wings soared, steel blades and bone whips instantly separating the tail. Following with a fierce iron fist, a single blow shattered the Higurashi to the ground. Kill now? No, only the Higurashi was shattered. Scorpion, clad in the divine robe, remained unscathed. At this moment, the chakra threads coiled around his chest finally took effect. As the scrolls behind him suddenly shattered, a terrifying scene unfolded amidst the cloud of dust. What? For the puppetry lineage, 10 fingers was the ultimate number, and beyond that, human power was unmatched. It was precisely because of this common-sense constraint that the scene before them seemed so shocking, because it overturned everyone's common sense. Kachakaka, the strange sound before the fight with Chihayo was exactly the same, only even more strange and terrifying than before. Looking around, in the distant sky, more than 100 hideous puppets appeared in the blink of an eye, and without exception, they were all controlled by Scorpion. At this point, the function of those densely packed chakra threads that looked like silk threads is self-evident. It actually, has it come to this point, the corner of his eye twitched, and looking at everything in front of him, Chihayo suddenly felt something was wrong. Today's situation might not end well. The Fourth Hokage and the woman are still in a fight. Although it seems that Kikai has the upper hand, the other party has been holding back and is a big threat. On his side, the power of the Tenkan-Matsu people does not need to be great, but even with this godlike trick, how much power they can exert in this overwhelming sea of puppets is still uncertain. The number of 10 fingers is the limit of a puppeteer. After leaving Filiuhu, Scorpion's voice was no longer hindered, but it no longer sounded so low. Since when did you become so complacent? The hanging thread trembled, and the puppets in the sky suddenly grasped weapons. The battle was imminent. Today, I'll show you what I can do. Scorpion's tone was tinged with sarcasm, clearly not taking the enemy seriously. Red's secret technique, 100 machine maneuver, with a clasp of hands, the power of chakra instantly flowed through his body. The puppets suspended in the sky suddenly felt it, no longer as calm as a mountain. In the blink of an eye, they were aggressive and raging. After all, the battlefield is not the place for romance. So, let's resolve everything with slaughter. But a child's face couldn't hide anything. Their young eyes darkened, as if concealing countless sorrows. Orochimaru shook his head. He didn't understand why, even in disguise, he had to bring little Shn through Konoha's main gate. The person beside him was clearly trouble, yet it always made him feel uneasy for no reason. Well, now was the perfect opportunity to leave her to that person. Though he thought so, his actions and words didn't match his heart. A pair of arms silently enveloped Shn, then silently held her in his embrace, still that cold, yet tender embrace. Don't move. Sleep a little longer. The raspy voice had never been pleasant, but now it was so reassuring. Yes. Shn knows, feeling the little head pressed against his heart, Orochimaru's steps became even more unsteady. Was it right or wrong for him to bring her here at this moment? Chapter 251, Behind the Scenes. PS First update. Sorry. I'm not feeling well, typing is difficult. Thinking is useless. The man smiled bitterly and shook his head. Orochimaru, oh Orochimaru, when did you become so indecisive? Yes. Perhaps it was destined from the day this child stumbled into his laboratory. What was it about this child, who was no different from those experimental subjects, that touched the most secret, the softest part of his heart? Orochimaru couldn't explain it clearly, but when he first realized that he had a soft spot for this girl, he almost didn't hesitate to kill her. Emotion has always been a ninja's weakness. Love is like this, and family is naturally like this. Although it was just an unreasonable premonition, this child might become his last and only flaw. So, just pick up the poison needle at hand, and in a moment, this little kid will stop breathing. But is everything really that simple? Can he really not hold back? Orochimaru considered himself cold-blooded, but when he actually held the child in his arms, the weight, seemingly even lighter than a syringe, caused him to tremble for no apparent reason. He held the girl tighter in his arms, his wry smile growing deeper. At this point, nothing could be undone. Weakness, after all, was a weakness. Besides the reincarnation jutsu that troubled him, he seemed to have landed himself in an even bigger trouble. He stepped forward, the mask created by the facial writing jutsu was not so easily seen through, and Konoha was always on guard against enemies breaking through the barrier. As for walking through the main gate with such dignity, holding a child in his arms, perhaps only Orochimaru could have done it. Of course, being a wise man, Orochimaru wouldn't take little Shn directly to the Senju residence. Not to mention his current, indefensible status, for the sake of the child alone, Orochimaru wouldn't let her suffer even the slightest injustice. While he knew Shinayu's usual behavior, being a bastard was taboo for the powerful families. Furthermore, Shn wasn't even considered a bastard. Better to find Shinayu first. While confronting him in broad daylight wasn't entirely appropriate, having already risked entering here for the girl in his arms, there was nothing to complain about. Am I considered my mother's family? The self-deprecating smile widened. Little Shn, unsure of her uncle's laughter, simply tugged at his shirt as she clung to him. Compared to the unsettling father she'd never met, the uncle before her, who seemed gloomy and terrifying to outsiders, was far more reassuring. The seemingly peaceful ninja world has begun a new round of turmoil. Compared to 4 years ago, this confrontation takes place in the shadows, on the brink of collapse, yet it's even more precarious and filled with murderous intent. The spies long hidden in the wind and water kingdoms are beginning to take effect, but it's not just Shinayu who's anticipating the enemy's moves. Beyond Konoha itself, numerous spies dispatched by the Fire Nation and scattered throughout the ninja world are reporting alarming and puzzling news. Even the intelligence reported by Kabuto suggests an eyewitness account of Uchiha Madara. A madman resurrected? A war about to begin? The ninja world is in turmoil. Of course not. Uchiha's move was completely unexpected, but having concluded that his opponent lacked the capability to start a war, Shinayu understood the purpose of the move, simply to distract Konoha's attention. With a seemingly blind, random attack, Shinayu couldn't discern the enemy's true objectives. This naturally thwarted his plan to inflict a crushing defeat on the enemy in their infancy. However, things seemed more complicated than that. Lack of strength. From what I can tell, even if you could assemble a team like in the original novel, there would still be fewer than 5 truly top-tier fighters. If he simply made enemies with this level of power, exceeding the tolerance of the major powers and causing them to unite, wouldn't that be more harm than good? Was he missing something? His heart sank, but after a moment, clarity returned. Over the years, Shin-Aong had long since grown from the ant who relied solely on the original novel's plot and his own limited wits. Now, whether they admitted it or not, in the eyes of the other factions, he was undeniably the foremost figure in the ninja world. Standing on the summit, he naturally faced the whirlwinds of the world. What was there to fear? If you can't figure it out, don't dwell on it. Just focus on this one city. Now it seems that the most critical situation is the Sand Shinobi of Rumoi. The intelligence about the battle last night has been reported back. Such a large-scale invasion ended up with much ado about nothing, which reminded Shin-Aong of that night many years ago. Is it the same old trick again? Even if Shin-Aong gave the order now, by the time the order was delivered, everything would have been settled. Is this subtle difference in time your trick, Uchiha? Things have changed, but there are always some habits that cannot be changed, just like the sneer on Shin-Aong's lips. You think too simply. However, that sneer suddenly warmed up. Shin-Aong smiled and squatted down, opening his arms. Be good, come here, my princess. Chapter 253, The Beginning and End of the War. P.S. Spy stuff, is there anyone better than the spy chief? Gaga. Red secret technique, 100 machine maneuver. The battlefield, after all, is no place for romance, so, let's settle everything with slaughter. 10 machines versus 100, the battle between 2 generations of supreme puppeteers, young and old, finally captures all attention. On one side stands Chiyo, known as the legendary sand ninja of the century. On the other, the long-defected puppet prodigy, Scorpion. This battle, surpassing the limits of puppetry, erupts in an instant. Kill. Hundreds of machines unleash, the boundless crimson adding a murderous aura. The human puppets clatter, and in the blink of an eye, the mechanisms in their forearms simultaneously unlock, releasing a torrent of hidden weapons. Young and vigorous, with extraordinary skill, the fierce Scorpion attacks with unstoppable force, his aggression unleashing a fiery rage. On the other side, Chiyo, despite his advanced age, remained undaunted. 10 puppets arrayed before him, motionless yet unmoving, their demeanor and imposing presence unwavering as a mountain. His 10 fingers flicked with exquisite precision, leaving no room for error. With a single finger, Chiyo displayed a myriad of magical feats, controlling a complex puppet system with a single finger. Puppets 1 and 2 stood guard beside Chiyo, unfazed by the rain of needles. Their fists danced wildly, and in an instant, the needles rained down, yet not a single one touched them. The remaining puppets, unwilling to sit still and wait for death, divided into 3 teams, each forming a single line. Facing the rain of needles, the first, wielding dual blades, moved with the swiftness of clouds and flowing water, forging a path through a seemingly hopeless situation. Following closely behind, the puppets behind him took advantage of this opening to engage in a fierce battle with the hundreds of machines descending from the sky. The blades struck a body, like leather, while some only heard a clanging, cracking sound. This was like a sure field, where over 100 people fought in a bloody battle, like the terrifying meat grinder of the samurai era. The movements of both sides were so fast that it was hard to keep up, and the moment of contact, life and death were decided. But in this terrible war, there was no blood splattering, no widespread wailing. The entire battlefield was constantly destroyed by the manipulation of both sides, but it remained silent. All people could hear was the constant sound of breaking metal. This terrifying oppression and silence almost brought people to collapse. The long sword slashed horizontally, and the attacking enemy was expressionless. Although the red clothes were only stiff, their skills were indeed real. This was not the end. When the murderous intent was revealed, the puppet on the left also attacked. The short sword just passed under the former's armpit. At that moment, the horizontal slash was simultaneously stabbed in the air, directly hitting the opponent's face. The white-clothed puppet also showed no fear. With both swords in hand, she leaped with all her might, arriving first after the latter's attack, unexpectedly stepping onto the blades first. Her left blade swept through everything, severing both the arm in front of her and the cold sword attacker behind her. Taking advantage of the momentary loss of balance, she rolled away, dodging the powerful crossbow from behind. With a swift swing of her right arm, a cloud of dust rose to the ground. The puppet battle was fierce, but for the two puppeteers, it was a completely different scene. Chiyo's fingers, entwined with threads of chakra, each movement shaped her entire body. Her terrifying finger movements, like butterflies flitting through flowers, were unpredictable, coming and going without a trace. 10 puppets, under her strenuous control, fought bravely against the enemy, and even now, not a single one was damaged. Did she have the upper hand? No, quite the opposite. Even such terrifying tactics were powerless against the boundless sea of puppets. Against 10, the puppet's merits were irrelevant, and how could the handiwork of the chef, Scorpion of the Red Sand, be anything but ordinary? Even if the fuselage was damaged, the body, arms, and even individual joints could still serve as deadly weapons. The longer they fought, the more unfathomable the enemy seemed, and the longer they fought, the slimmer their chances of survival became. Puppetry is a battle of the smallest details, where victory or failure hangs in the balance of a moment. Both puppets are imbued with a deadly poison, and even the slightest scratch could spell the end of the battle. The current deadlock could be brought to an end at any moment. Fighting to stay strong, Chiyo realized that the situation before her was not only the fate of 2 generations, but also the survival of the entire Sand Village. The thread tightened, and the killing move was revealed. Puppets 4, 6, and 9 each used their mighty moves to temporarily escape their immediate foe. In the blink of an eye, they merged, 2 below, 1 atop the other's shoulders. All 3 simultaneously formed hand seals. What was this? The onlookers were all moved. Throughout history, puppeteers who used puppets in combat were often criticized for their inability to leverage the power of ninjutsu. Puppets were essentially inanimate beings, relying on the chakra of their masters for movement. Without the channels through which chakra flowed, ninjutsu was impossible. As the puppeteer, each finger connected by chakra threads, was unable to form hand seals. Thus, ninjutsu became the puppeteer's Achilles heel. But what unfolded before their eyes defied common sense. Puppetry technique, 3 treasures absorption. As each puppet uttered the words Buddha, Dharma, and monk, the combined force of their hands instantly absorbed countless enemy puppets. The battlefield was in turmoil. It's worthy of being the work of the first generation, worthy of being the work of Chiyo, known as the Sand Shinobi's greatest puppeteer. But, is this the end? Sasori, standing across from him, showed no sign of panic. His hands clenched tightly, he uttered no words, but judging by his appearance, this battle was far from over. Just then, a soft shout emanated from Uchiha Airi. Having been locked in a long struggle with the Fourth Hokage, she had suddenly drifted to Sasori's side, a hint of allure on her lips. That's enough for today. Her words made no sense, yet they were spoken with unrestrained abandon. The Sand Shinobi village truly deserves to be one of the 5 great nations. What happened today? I will come back to exact my revenge. With those words, the 2 figures simultaneously vanished, leaving only the devastated ground. Silently telling of the terrible battle that had taken place here. A whimper? A fading, unsuccessful battle? The Sand Village had no time to worry about these things. Gai, the Hokage, shook his head helplessly. Although he hadn't yet used his Sand Gold secret technique, the opponent was clearly more at ease. If they continued to stand, the Sand Village might not benefit. Although it was a helpless statement, the opponent's decision to stop at this moment might not be a bad thing for the Sand Village. Of course, at this moment, Gai had never considered that this seemingly meaningless battle was just the beginning of a conspiracy. The Sand Shinobi had disbanded, and after the war, everyone was exhausted. No one cared whether a middle-aged ninja, also looking exhausted, quietly returned to his residence, or disappeared into a cloud of smoke in some unknown corner. And in a house in the Sand Village, an elderly man sitting in the living room silently opened his eyes, gently touched his hands together, and instantly checked his chakra flow. Wasn't he affected by the illusion? In other words, when facing her, the clone technique could have a miraculous effect? The thought barely formed before the old man dismissed it. This time, hidden within the battle formation, even the Sharingan couldn't discern whether one of the figures in the throng was merely a clone. A direct confrontation would likely expose him from the start. But what if it was him? Would release his ability to clone and confuse the enemy was truly remarkable. It was a shame he'd already fallen prey to it in that great battle so many years ago. A vague smile tugged at the corners of his mouth, and the old man finally came to his senses. Perhaps he was worrying too much? He must have his own solution. After all, their personalities were somewhat similar in that regard. The important thing was the matter at hand. The old man calmly stood up and opened the door. Uchiha Irie. Years ago, you already battled the leader of Konoha's route. How much luck will you have this time? The moon was silent. Danzo was silent. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.